Why did Lord Karl not come to receive his reward in person? I wish to meet this young hero. Friedrich bowed slightly. Your Majesty, Conford is in ruins. My brother must oversee the recovery and care for the wounded. He begs your forgiveness for his absence. Nonsense, the king waved dismissively. His dedication to his people is a model for all. I shall reward him handsomely to aid in the reconstruction. He announced the rewards for me. I was promoted to Viscount, a title historically used for deputies managing frontier lands. I was also named Guardian of the North, granted 100,000 silver coins, 50,000 caddies of grain, and various building materials, with generous pensions for the fallen. Friedrich knew that how much of this would actually reach Conford was questionable, given the usual bureaucratic corruption. Yet, he bowed deeply. On behalf of my brother and the people of Conford, I thank you, Your Majesty. The king's public rewards secured me and Conford immense prestige and political capital. The next morning, Place City's central square was packed with citizens. The crowd gathered to witness the legendary pile of Sorin barbarian heads and celebrate the hard-won victory. On a grand platform, King Heinrich XI sat in his ceremonial robes, beaming with pride. Beside him stood his chief scribe and court poet, Caspar von Schmidt, my half-brother. Caspar, dressed in elegant official robes, radiated excitement. He held a gold-trimmed parchment containing his ode to the great victory at Conford, written over a sleepless night. As Friedrich's soldiers displayed the gruesome Sorin heads, the square erupted in deafening cheers. After the crowd vented their emotions, Caspar stepped forward and began to recite his ode, detailing the Sorin tribe's siege of the northern frontier fortress of Conford. He praised Lord Karl von Schmidt for his extraordinary courage and unwavering loyalty to the king. Despite being outnumbered and facing starvation, my forces held the walls with blood and defiance. Thanks to the king's foresight and reinforcements, the army executed a pincer maneuver. The Solon army was crushed, leaving thousands of corpses behind. The victory was total, leaving the tribe terrified. This triumph proved both the bravery of Lord Karl and the king's brilliant leadership. The ode brought peace back to the northern territory, though it was heavily embellished. It cleverly attributed the victory to the king's divine wisdom, framing my heroism as merely a reflection of royal glory. Caspar's balance of flattery and recognition satisfied the king while highlighting his brother's deeds. Heinrich XI was ecstatic, especially at the repeated mentions of his own divine nature. After the reading, the king stood and personally recited the core passages to the crowd. The square roared with chants for the king, the Plantagenet kingdom, and the hero of Conford. The ceremony cemented the king's prestige at a new peak. I became a household name across the royal capital. Friedrich watched from below, feeling conflicted. He was happy for his brother's recognition, but wary of the political theater. Regardless, the bloodshed at Conford had brought new glory to the Schmidt family. Unaware of my legendary status in the capital, I remained in the north. Meanwhile, at the royal hunting ground outside Place City, a feast was underway. A drunken Heinrich XI bragged to his nobles about his brilliant role in the Conford victory. Queen Katharina von Eisenberg sat beside him, offering a detached smile and refilling his wine. Unlike usual, she had a glass of her own and sipped it alongside him. Heinrich, blurred by drink, questioned her unusual indulgence. Katharina smiled, her expression obscured by firelight, and toasted to the king's leadership and the peace of the Plantagenet kingdom. She drank elegantly, encouraging the king to do the same. Delighted, Heinrich pulled her close and demanded more wine. Under her subtle influence, the king drank until his eyes glazed over and his speech slurred. Prince Sigmund approached with a wine glass. The teenager wore a mask of rehearsed composure and hidden tension. He toasted his father, praising his strategic brilliance and calling him a lifelong role model. The flattery fed Heinrich's vanity. He praised his heir before downing another drink. He slumped in his seat, barely able to hold himself up. Horns sounded. The hunters had driven a beast into the designated shooting zone. A guard reported the prey's arrival and handed the king a loaded musket. Heinrich struggled to stand, needing help from his guards to remain upright. He took the musket, failing to notice it felt slightly lighter than usual. He was guided to a small hill with a preset firing rest. The guard adjusted the weapon to aim at the clearing below. A massive, agitated wild boar stood in the clearing. The beast paced and growled, trapped by the hunters. Heinrich squinted, his breath heavy with alcohol, struggling to aim. Just as he prepared to fire, Queen Katerina turned to Sir Hans, the guard beside the king. She whispered urgently, claiming to see a suspicious flash in the woods and ordering him to investigate. Sir Hans hesitated. His duty was to guard the king during the shot, but the queen's tone was absolute. He glanced at the king, then at the queen, and wavered. In that moment of distraction, Heinrich pulled the trigger. The musket fired with a dull thud, the powder charge having been tampered with. The drunken king felt only a slight recoil and noticed nothing. The bullet struck the boar's shoulder but lacked the force to penetrate its thick hide and fat. The beast roared in pain, unkilled. The boar, maddened by pain, locked its red eyes onto the source of the gunshot. Seeing the drunken figure on the slope, the beast charged at King Heinrich XI like a runaway warhammer. "Protect the king. Careful, your majesty." The crowd erupted in panic. The sudden chaos caused the nobles and attendants to scatter in terror. Sir Hans, distracted by the queen, reacted too late. The boar reached the slope before he could intervene. Sobered by fear, King Heinrich stood frozen, unable to dodge the charging beast. He stumbled and collapsed, screaming in despair as the boar slammed into his abdomen. The impact sent the king flying. The boar's tusks tore through his hunting gear, drawing blood. The frenzied beast trampled over the fallen king before veering off into the woods. By the time guards rallied with spears, the boar had vanished. King Heinrich XI lay curled on the grass, groaning in agony. His hunting clothes were shredded, and a deep, bleeding wound stained the grass crimson. Pale and weak, the king was clearly suffering from severe internal trauma, plunging the camp into chaos. Queen Katerina rushed to his side, weeping and calling for the court physician. Prince Sigmund knelt beside his father, trembling with an ambiguous mix of fear and emotion. Sir Hans and the guards knelt nearby, paralyzed by the weight of their failure. A guard captain with basic medical knowledge stepped forward to inspect the wound. His face turned ashen as he whispered to the nobles, "The wound is too deep. His organs are pierced. The bleeding won't stop." The news was a death sentence. Internal organ damage was fatal in this era. To make matters worse, they lacked a court priest or high-level healing potion for this impromptu hunt. The nearest capable healer was 140 kilometers away in the city of Play. Queen Katerina took charge, her voice firm despite her tears. "Return to the royal capital. Transport the king carefully and at full speed." No one dared defy her. They placed the unconscious king onto the most comfortable royal carriage. The convoy abandoned all non-essential supplies and raced toward Play. Yet, hope remained slim. The carriage's jolting was agonizing for someone with internal injuries. The king's breathing grew shallow, his skin turning a deathly gray as internal bleeding persisted. The queen and Prince Sigmund remained inside, their cries filling the air with despair. The rest of the party rode in a silence heavy with shock and fear. It was unthinkable that a king at the height of his power could be brought to the brink of death by a mere accident. It felt like a cruel joke of fate. 2 days later, the convoy reached a royal post station 40 kilometers from Play. The king was at death's door, his pulse barely detectable. Everyone knew he would not survive the journey. That night, Heinrich XI experienced a sudden, lucid moment of clarity, as if the goddess had revealed a final truth. He dismissed everyone except 3 key officials: Olivier, the Lord Keeper of the Seal; Alvin, the chief court scribe; Wolfgang, the Minister of Interior and Royal Intelligence Chief. The 3 knelt in the dim, heavy atmosphere of the room, awaiting his final words. Heinrich spoke with unexpected resolve. "My time is short. Listen to my final command." He gasped, "Disinherit Prince Sigmund. I name Princess Louise the next ruler of the Plantagenet kingdom." The officials were stunned. Princess Louise. She was the king's eldest daughter, intelligent but politically isolated. Prince Sigmund, the queen's son, was the widely accepted heir. This change would surely trigger a civil war, and the Eisenberg family would never accept it. Duke Olivier urged caution. "Your Majesty, this will cause chaos. Prince Sigmund is the legal heir. Please reconsider." "It is my decision." Heinrich snapped, his gaze piercing. I have seen the truth. Sigmund is unfit. Only Louise carries the true blood of Heinrich to protect our legacy. His words carried the weight of a prophecy. Such divine revelations on a deathbed held immense authority. Count Alvin, the scribe, knew this would alter history forever. Trembling, he asked, "Shall we draft a formal imperial decree?" "Yes. Write it now," the king commanded. "Wolfgang, witness. Olivier, seal it. Alvin, record it." Quickly, the three officials exchanged looks of fear and immense pressure. They knew they had to execute the king's final, lucid order. "As you command," they replied in unison. Under the flickering candlelight, Alvin recorded the decree that would reshape the kingdom. Duke Olivier produced the royal seal, while Wolfgang stood by as a witness. Once the seal was pressed, King Heinrich's strength vanished, and he slipped back into unconsciousness. 3 days later, when the convoy reached Play, King Heinrich XI was already dead. The news was strictly contained, known only to the queen, the prince, and a few core ministers. Under Marquis Wolfgang's arrangement, the king's body was secretly stored in an underground ice cellar. Publicly, it was announced that the king was resting after a hunting accident and would receive no visitors. Queen Katerina, previously low profile, seized control with remarkable decisiveness. Citing the king's serious injury, she used secret channels to order her father, Count Eisenberg, to mobilize troops from Eagle's Nest Fortress. Unlike the sluggish response during the Salonian siege, Count Eisenberg acted with shocking speed. Within a day, thousands of elite Eagle's Nest cavalry appeared at Play City, seizing and sealing all palace entrances. The palace was transformed into a stronghold controlled by the Eisenberg family. The coup proceeded efficiently, starting with Princess Louise. The quiet, unassuming princess was surrounded in her quarters by armed soldiers before she realized what was happening. Guards were replaced, and she was informed she was under house arrest for her own safety. Next, the queen targeted the 3 ministers who knew of the king's final decree. Lord Keeper of the Seal Olivier sat in his office, surrounded by scrolls and the scent of wax. Only a single lamp illuminated his desk against the encroaching darkness. He gripped a dry quill, his brow furrowed as he agonized over the king's decree. The document, naming Princess Louise as heir, had placed him in a precarious position. He felt the crushing weight of the decision. Princess Louise lacked a political foundation in the treacherous royal court. The late king had never cultivated a faction, loyalists, or military support for her. Consequently, few were willing to gamble their futures on a powerless young princess. Her mother's family, minor southern nobles, offered no substantial support. Olivier mentally scanned for potential allies, ambiguous generals or cautious dukes. None were willing to challenge the formidable Queen Katerina and the Eisenberg family. A sense of suffocating helplessness gripped him. A wrong move would destroy not only his career, but his entire family. Just as he struggled to find a path forward, bang! The heavy oak doors were violently kicked open, shaking the room. Olivier jumped, his quill dropping and staining the map on his desk. Armed soldiers in black armor swarmed the room like wolves. They occupied every corner, their cold steel reflecting the lamplight. Before he could speak, 2 burly soldiers seized him, rendering him immobile. Another soldier searched him, seizing the copy of the decree and handing it to their officer. "What is the meaning of this?" "I am the Lord Keeper of the Seal." Olivier stammered in terror. The captain looked at him with cold indifference. "Acting under orders. Take him away." Before he could process the command, Olivier was dragged into the dark corridor. He realized the queen had outmaneuvered him. He was soon shackled and charged with treason and poisoning the king. Without a chance to defend himself, he was thrown into the damp dungeons. The queen then summoned scribe Count Alvin and Minister of Interior Marquis Wolfgang to the throne room. Entering the hall, they found the atmosphere grim. Queen Katerina sat on the throne, exuding cold authority. The hall was lined with Eisenberg warriors, the air thick with murderous intent. Olivier was nowhere to be seen. Wolfgang and Alvin exchanged a look of profound dread. They realized the worst had occurred. The queen declared, "The king has passed. To stabilize the realm, Prince Sigmund, the legitimate heir, must ascend immediately." She then added, "However, I hear rumors that some have attempted to manipulate the dying king into forging a decree." Fixing her gaze on Alvin, she asked, "As scribe, what do you have to say about this?" Sweat beaded on Alvin's forehead. He was paralyzed by the choice between betraying the late king or facing certain death. Katerina turned to Wolfgang, her tone deceptively mild. "Marquis, you have served well. For the sake of stability, I offer you two choices. First, resign due to frailty. I will grant you gold and allow you to retire with your family, keeping your titles and lands." Before she could state the second option, Wolfgang bowed immediately. "I thank the queen for her grace. I am indeed old and wish to retire." He knew the cruelty of the coup. Olivier's fate was a warning. Resisting meant death. He chose to preserve his life and family. Empress Dowager Catherine, satisfied with Wolfgang's swift surrender, commanded him to pack and leave the capital immediately. Wolfgang bowed and fled the suffocating hall without delay. Only Count Alvin remained, surrounded by the Empress and her guards. Catherine's gaze turned icy. "Count Alvin, it is your turn. Will you choose to retire like Wolfgang, or will you persist? Will you cling to a last will that may not exist and condemn your wife and 16-year-old daughter, Emily, to rot in a dungeon? Or will you swear loyalty to the new king, Sigmund, and retain your position as chief scribe, ensuring your family's prosperity?" Her words struck at Alvin's greatest weakness. Thinking of his beloved daughter, Emily, and the horrors awaiting her, Count Alvin trembled, his face deathly pale. Serving King Sigmund is still serving the Plantagenet royal family, Catherine tempted. "Just make a small correction to history. Your pen shall record the new king's benevolence, not accidents." Alvin's resolve shattered. His love for his family and fear of the Empress overcame his loyalty to the late king. He collapsed, weeping, and produced the true last will of the late king, witnessed by Olivier and Wolfgang. I pledge my loyalty to King Sigmund," he choked out, presenting the document. Catherine took it with a cold smile. With a flick of her finger, she used a minor fire spell to incinerate the will into ash. She then handed Alvin a blank, royal-sealed parchment. "Rewrite it. State that King Heinrich XI died of a sudden illness while hunting and, in his final moments, clearly named his son, Sigmund von Heinrich, as his successor." Trembling, Alvin took up his pen to forge a new history that would dictate the kingdom's future. Seeing the final stroke, Catherine smiled in triumph. "A wise decision, Count. Your family will be proud." This swift political coup ended in a total victory for Empress Catherine and the Eisenberg family. The next day, the official announcement declared King Heinrich XI had died of a sudden illness during a hunt. It also declared Sigmund von Heinrich the new king and announced that the former Lord Keeper of the Seal, Duke Olivier, had been executed for regicide. The central square of play was packed, the atmosphere grim. Duke Olivier stood on the scaffold, disheveled but defiant. His charges were read aloud, inciting the crowd's fury. Queen Mother Catherine and the young King Sigmund watched from the dais. As the executioner raised his axe, Olivier shouted, "Catherine, Sigmund, you are usurpers. You murdered the loyal. The ancestors of Plantagenet watch you. I will wait for you in hell." The axe fell, and his head rolled, staining the platform with blood. Guided by agitators, the crowd erupted in cheers of "Long live the king" and "Death to the traitor." The bloody coup concluded under the guise of justice. Yet, Olivier's final curse remained like a dark omen. The new king's throne was built upon conspiracy, blood, and lies. After settling state affairs, Catherine von Eisenberg retreated to a secluded, luxurious chamber deep within the palace. The room was warm and scented with ambergris, a stark contrast to the cold palace halls. A fire roared in the hearth. A man in deep purple robes embroidered with dark gold runes lounged on a velvet couch. He was handsome, with an air of sinister elegance, swirling a glass of amber wine. His features bore a striking resemblance to the new king, Sigmund. He looked at Catherine with a playful, knowing smirk. "Well, have you cleared away the annoying flies?" Catherine's icy mask melted, her expression turning soft and dependent, like a girl before her lover. She nestled into his arms, complaining playfully, "Victor, you are so relaxed. I have been exhausted dealing with those old foxes." This man was Mage Victor, Catherine's secret lover and mastermind. Few knew of his existence, and none knew of his secret relationship with the Queen Mother or his blood connection to King Sigmund. Victor stroked her hair. As long as it's done. So, our little Sigmund is finally on the throne. Yes, Catherine replied, finding comfort in his heartbeat. Everything went according to your plan. Olivier is dead, Alvin has sworn loyalty, and as for Wolfgang, she sneered, a cowardly wolf. He smelled danger and fled to his hometown to retire. She looked up, eyes gleaming with power. Now, Play City and the entire Plantagenet kingdom are ours. Victor sipped his wine, smug. I didn't expect it to be this easy. They were weaker than we thought. Catherine frowned, asking the question that lingered in her mind. Why were you in such a rush to kill Heinrich? He was old. We could have waited for him to die naturally. Wasn't it too risky? Victor set his glass down, his eyes turning cold. We had no choice. News from the northern frontier. Rochefort and I repelled Harold's army. Our prestige is soaring. Heinrich valued the northern frontier. He would have rewarded them heavily. The kingdom's resources would have flowed north, leaving little for your father, Count Eisenberg. Worse, Rochefort's power would have become impossible to contain. We had to strike before Heinrich could empower Rochefort. Killing Heinrich and installing the puppet Sigmund was the only way to secure our control. Catherine's doubts vanished, replaced by total adoration. She kissed him, whispering, "You are so brilliant, Victor." As she leaned against him, her expression turned vicious. And what about that little wretch, Louise? She is Heinrich's daughter, with pure royal blood. She is a woman, but a liability nonetheless. I don't want old loyalists using her to threaten Sigmund's throne. How should we dispose of her? We can't just. She drew a finger across her throat in a cold, decisive gesture. Yet, her eyes lacked true malice, betraying her hesitation. She clearly felt murder was not the best path. The late king's sudden death was already shrouded in suspicion, with rumors spreading like poison. Killing Princess Louise, the king's only legitimate daughter and heir, at such a sensitive time would invite disaster. It would arm those loyal to the old regime, turning a political purge into a public scandal that could unite neutral factions against the new throne. The risk was simply too high. Victor smiled confidently, sipping his wine. Killing a royal is the most foolish path. We must make her useful. He lifted Katerina's chin. We have the perfect place to place her. Lord Karl of Conford just achieved a great victory and deserves royal favor. Katerina's eyes brightened. Victor continued. We marry Princess Louise to this northern hero with full royal honors. It will appear as a grand gesture of grace from the new king. It honors the hero and silences critics, showcasing the new king's benevolence. His voice turned cold. In reality, sending her to the desolate, war-torn northern frontier is effectively exiling her from the royal capital. Without her old allies, she'll be a fish out of water. Her best fate will be to live out her days in Conford. Isn't that a permanent solution? Katerina beamed, kissing Victor. Brilliant. You're a genius. We remove a threat, appear generous, and secure a capable border lord all at once. Imagining Louise rotting in the cold north, she added, I'll have Sigmund draft the decree tomorrow. I'll oversee this grand wedding myself. Victor held her, though a fleeting, deep calculation flickered in his eyes. Beyond the immediate benefits, this marriage could serve a more hidden purpose. With his victory against the Solon army, my influence and the strategic value of Conford were rising rapidly. The fortress was like a wild horse that needed a bridle. What better leash than a princess of royal blood, nominally the mistress of the territory? Through her, he could plant spies, monitor Conford's movements, and intervene under the guise of familial duty when necessary. This was a long-term play, one he didn't need to explain to Katerina yet. Deep within the play palace, a cold, elegant bedroom. Princess Louise sat by the window, staring at the gray sky. She had been under protective house arrest for 2 days. Guards stood outside, forbidding her from leaving or receiving visitors. The food was fine, but the maid's wary silence signaled that her fate hung by a thread. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied back, revealing a pale, anxious forehead. She inherited her late mother's ethereal beauty, though her brow was perpetually clouded with melancholy. Her relationship with King Heinrich had been distant. The pleasure-seeking king paid little mind to his quiet daughter. Still, he was her only living kin. The isolation filled her with dread. A key turned in the lock. Louise stood up, heart pounding, smoothing her dress. Queen Katerina entered. Dressed in solemn black, the queen looked pale but possessed an air of unquestionable authority. She dismissed the guards and closed the door. "Mother," Louise curtsied, her voice trembling. She had always feared her stepmother. Katerina was shrewd and controlled the palace, maintaining only a facade of courtesy toward the former queen's daughter. "No need for formalities, Louise," Katerina said with forced warmth. "You must have been frightened these past 2 days." Louise sat cautiously. "Mother, what has happened? Is father well?" Katerina sighed, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "Louise, I have tragic news. Your father, he suffered a sudden illness while hunting and has passed away." "What?" Louise gasped, turning deathly pale. Shock overwhelmed her. The news hit her like a hammer. She swayed, nearly collapsing. "Father, how?" She choked back tears. Katerina watched coldly until the sobbing subsided. "The kingdom cannot be without a ruler. Per your father's final decree, your brother Sigmund has ascended the throne." Louise nodded, wiping her eyes. She cared nothing for the throne. She only wanted a quiet life. "Mother, may I see him? To pay my final respects." Seeing Louise's lack of ambition, Katerina felt relieved but remained cautious. "Not now? The funeral is being prepared, and the situation is delicate. For your safety, you must remain here." Seeing Louise yield, Katerina knew the first test was passed. The girl had no interest in power, but she remained a potential threat. A living heir in the capital was a ticking time bomb. It was time to reveal the plan. Katerina's tone softened. "Louise, your father was concerned for your future. He wanted you to have a secure and happy life." Louise looked at her, bewildered. Katerina smiled benevolently. "You've heard of the young lord in Conford who defeated the Solon army?" "Aye, Karl von Schmidt, Duke Schmidt's youngest son." Louise nodded softly. I read about his deeds in the papers." Louise knew little of the war-torn northern territory or its lord. Beyond my name and recent victory." Queen Katerina leaned forward, smiling. "Your father deemed Lord Karl a talented, loyal youth of suitable age and status for you. Therefore, in his final decree, your father commanded that you, Princess Louise of the Plantagenet Kingdom, shall marry me." The news struck Louise like a thunderbolt. She was to marry a stranger from the frozen north, known only through newspapers? She stood frozen, mouth agape, tears replaced by sheer shock and bewilderment. This was no request. It was an absolute, non-negotiable command. Seeing Louise's stunned state, the queen's last concerns vanished. The princess was indeed a pawn easily controlled. The queen patted her shoulder with forced warmth. "This is your father's arrangement. Carnford is peaceful now. Lord Karl has a bright future. Being a lady of the north, far from the capital's strife, is the best fate for you." Louise looked at the queen's mask-like face, feeling utterly helpless. With her father dead and her brother on the throne, she was a prisoner in her own palace. She bowed her head, whispering, "I obey." Tears fell for her lost autonomy and drifting fate. The queen smiled. "Good girl. I will prepare a lavish dowry. Rest here and prepare to be a bride." She left, and the heavy door locked behind her with a final, audible click. Louise remained alone in the room. She slumped in her chair, staring at the sky through the high walls, feeling like a bird with broken wings sent to an unknown fate. Her marriage had become a vital, yet trivial, chip in a power game. Meanwhile, at the Lord's Hall in France City, the castle was ablaze with lights and festive noise, celebrating a long-awaited victory. A massive fireplace warmed the grand hall against the northern winter night. The tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, white bread, and blood-red wine. Count Rochefort, governor of the northern province, stood in the center, beaming as he toasted with local elites. It was the most triumphant day of his tenure. The victory at Carnford had shocked the kingdom and brought immense glory to him as the North's guardian. His North Wind squad had played its part, and his protege, had performed a miracle. This win crippled the Solonians and cemented Rochefort's prestige across the kingdom. "Congratulations, Count. The Battle of Carnford has truly bolstered our nation's pride. Indeed, your command has produced such fierce warriors. With you guarding the north, we merchants feel secure," the guests flattered him. Their praise was genuine. The victory promised safety for trade routes. The Count accepted their toasts with pleasure. His gaze drifted to a quiet corner. A woman in a dark green velvet dress stood there, chatting softly. It was Isla, wife of the southern jeweler, Grimm. Isla caught his eye, offering a subtle, knowing smile. She gracefully walked toward him. "Good evening, Count," she said, curtsying softly. "Good evening, Isla," the Count replied, lingering on her face. "Thank you for attending. How could I miss such a triumph? The North is blessed to have you." Grimm, the jeweler, approached with a shrewd smile. "Count, congratulations. The victory at Carnford is truly inspiring. Grimm, you are here? I thought your business was in the south. Are you hunting for gem mines?" Grimm laughed. "The North's gems pale in comparison to your soldiers' glory." He turned serious. "The southern market is saturated. The North, however, is ripe for investment." He lowered his voice. "With the hero Carl guarding the border, I hear Carnford needs capital for reconstruction. I wish to invest in timber, fur, and ironworks. Could you introduce me to Lord Carl?" The Count admired Grimm's sharp business sense. Carnford was destined to be a strategic hub. The timing was perfect. The territory certainly needed the influx of funds. "Your vision is a blessing for the North. I will certainly introduce you when I arrive in France City." Grimm bowed, overjoyed. "Thank you, Count." He tactfully withdrew, leaving his wife with the Count. Isla looked at the Count, her eyes dancing with a meaningful smile. The Count toasted her, a silent understanding passing between them. Elsewhere, in Charlotte's cabin, the atmosphere was quiet and warm. The fireplace crackled, chasing away the winter chill. Charlotte sat at her desk, surrounded by crumpled drafts. She frowned in deep concentration, writing and pausing in turn. Knowing Carnford held and I was safe, Charlotte's anxiety vanished, and color returned to her cheeks. Though her pregnancy prevented travel, her heart was already with me. She drafted a letter to me, revising it repeatedly. She wanted to express her pride and share the news of her father's consent to our marriage, but hesitated to mention the baby. She decided to keep the pregnancy a secret for now, intending to give me a perfect surprise later. She finished the letter. "Carl, my dearest, father has agreed to our marriage. He asks that you come to France City as soon as Carnford is stable. I have a special surprise for you when you arrive. I miss you day and night. Stay safe. Yours forever, Charlotte." She set down her quill, feeling relieved and blushing with happiness. She folded the letter, sealed it with wax, and pressed her signet into it. Aunt Martha entered with a glass of warm milk. Seeing the finished letter, she smiled kindly. Martha held up a tiny, hand-knitted wool sock she had just finished. The stitches were fine and the color warm. "Miss, drink your milk," Martha said, offering the sock. "I just finished this for the little one. Is the size right?" Charlotte held the soft sock, overwhelmed by a wave of warmth and happiness. Imagining their child wearing it brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you, Aunt Martha. It's perfect," she whispered, choked with joy. Martha smiled and gently stroked Charlotte's rounded belly. "As long as you and the baby are safe, I am content." The two shared a warm, peaceful moment. Outside, the northern frontier winds howled, but inside, the room was cozy, filled with hope for the future. In France City Castle, the celebration ended late, and the castle grew quiet. In Count Roquefort's bedroom, the atmosphere was intimate. After the banquet, the Count and Isla retreated behind heavy curtains, the air scented with wine and Isla's perfume. Isla shed her gown, wearing only a silk slip that highlighted her curves. She touched the Count's flushed cheek, whispering, "Come, my lion. Let me see if you are as fierce tonight as you are on the battlefield." The Count looked at the woman who knew exactly how to please him. The stress of war and the excitement of victory, fueled by alcohol, ignited his primal urges. He swept Isla into his arms and carried her to the bed. At the Franklin territory, Duke Schmidt's study, the fireplace crackled, warming the damp winter air, which smelled of cigars and parchment. Duke Schmidt sat at his desk, frowning at several documents. To his left was the Play City Daily, featuring a headline about the great victory at Carnford, attributed largely to his second son, Caspar von Schmidt. The Duke smirked. The article was pure flattery, crediting the king's wise leadership to appease the crown. To his right, however, was a coded letter from Edgar. It provided a brutal, objective account of the siege, far removed from the newspaper's propaganda. It detailed the Solonian assault, the desperation of the defenders, my bravery, the wall's collapse, the arrival of Count Rockefeller's North Wind squad, and the selfless intervention of Friedrich and Conrad. The Duke's cold, calculating heart felt a rare ripple of emotion. He felt surprise, disbelief, and a burgeoning sense of pride. He was particularly pleased by the unity shown by Friedrich, Conrad, and me. Having spent his life maneuvering through power struggles, he knew the value of family cohesion. A house divided cannot stand. He hadn't expected me to inspire such loyalty in his half-brothers, especially the proud Conrad. This blood bond was the foundation of the Schmidt family's strength. Perhaps sending me to the northern frontier had been the right decision after all. He felt a twinge of regret for how he had treated my mother, Lady Irene. She had raised a son who shone in the face of despair. He remembered Irene, whom he had once pursued passionately before neglecting her as she aged. His subsequent lovers were young and flattering, yet he felt empty in his grand estate. They could not replace the genuine passion and warmth of his early life with Irene. Perhaps it was time to set aside his pride and bring Irene back. As he pondered this, a knock interrupted him. "Enter," the Duke commanded, regaining his composure. Sebastian, the steward, entered and bowed. "Duke, a royal messenger has arrived with an imperial decree." "A royal messenger?" The Duke frowned. He already knew that King Heinrich XI had died and Sigmund had succeeded him. He cared little for court intrigue as long as it didn't threaten his family. He was more concerned with the northern frontier and my marriage. "Why send a messenger now?" The Duke stood, adjusted his velvet coat, and ordered, "Have them wait in the main hall. I will be there shortly." "Yes, my lord." When the Duke entered the main hall, a solemn messenger awaited him. Behind the messenger, 2 attendants held a tray with a gold-bound scroll. The messenger stepped forward, bowing slightly before declaring in a clear, resonant voice, "In the name of King Sigmund von Heinrich of the Plantagenet Kingdom, Duke Schmidt, receive the imperial decree." I knelt calmly, my head bowed, while my mind raced. A new king's priority should be internal stability. Why send a decree to me in the south? Taxes? Grain? Or something regarding Karl in the northern frontier? The messenger began reading the standard opening about the new reign and the late king. I listened patiently. However, as the messenger reached the middle, my pupils contracted. My composed face betrayed sudden, intense shock. In recognition of the valor and meritorious service of the Lord of Conford, Karl von Schmidt, in defeating the barbarians and upholding our national prestige, His Majesty hereby decrees the marriage of his sister, Princess Louise, to Karl von Schmidt. A royal marriage? Princess Louise, the late king's reclusive eldest daughter? To Karl? The news hit me like a thunderclap. I knew of Karl's relationship with Charlotte, daughter of Count Rochefort, and had even favored it. A marriage with the powerful Rochefort family was mutually beneficial. This royal intervention shattered my plans. The messenger continued, "The wedding shall be held in Confort. The Schmidt family is ordered to send a high-ranking relative to preside over the ceremony." Silence filled the hall. I remained kneeling, my mind in turmoil. While ostensibly an honor, this political maneuver smelled of something sinister. With the young King Sigmund on the throne, power likely rested with Empress Dowager Catherine and the Eisenberg family. Sending the late king's daughter to marry a rising, yet base-level, frontier lord was clearly a tactic to exile a potential rival from the political center. It was a calculated political arrangement. Did Karl know? How would Count Rochefort react? What of Charlotte? Questions flooded my mind. Yet, I knew I must not show my hand. I stood, my face restored to its usual composure, and accepted the decree. I accept this decree with gratitude. The Schmidt family is honored by His Majesty's grace, I said steadily. The messenger nodded, exchanged pleasantries, and departed. Sebastian, the steward, returned to find me staring deeply into the fireplace. I retreated to my study, the heavy oak doors sealing out the world. I paced before the window, looking out at my orderly winter estate. I absent-mindedly fingered the heavy, delicate parchment of the decree. Sebastian waited, sensing the turbulent undercurrents beneath my calm exterior. Young King Sigmund, a mere child. I finally broke the silence. The Eisenbergs and Empress Dowager Catherine are surely behind this. The old king's death was suspicious, and this succession is even stranger. My voice dripped with irony. I even doubt the purity of Sigmund's bloodline. Now, they rush to marry off Princess Louise, the late king's only true heir, like a nuisance. The palace in Play City will become the Eisenbergs' private backyard. Sebastian asked cautiously, "How shall we respond, my lord? And what of Master Karl's marriage?" I turned, my eyes flashing with a mix of irritation, calculation, and excitement. My plan to infiltrate the North via the Rockefort alliance was ruined. I had lost a strategic opportunity, and my son had lost a love match. "The Rockefort alliance is off," I said, my tone shifting from regret to cold calculation. I sensed a new, predatory opportunity. However, I smirked cruelly. Karl marrying a princess isn't all bad. At least in name, the Schmidt family is now royal kin. My thoughts sharpened. Catherine and the Eisenbergs wanted to exile the princess and control Karl? Fine. Since they dared to use my son as a pawn, I would use this royal kin status to extract maximum profit. If you want to use the princess to bind my son and disrupt my northern plans, I will use this connection to make your lives difficult and compensate for my losses. My mindset turned purely utilitarian. If I couldn't gain northern influence, I would fleece the royal family to express my dissatisfaction. As for Karl's lost love, political gain outweighed personal sentiment. The Schmidt family never did business at a loss. I would treat this as revenge. They wanted to control my son, so I would profit from their name. "Sebastian," I commanded, "take my orders. First, all Schmidt caravans shall fly the royal crest alongside our own. Declare we are operating under royal decree to supply the crown. Demand full tax exemptions at every checkpoint. Any obstruction will be labeled as hindering royal business." I added sharply. "Second, inform all our agents and vassals in the south. In any dispute over resources or trade, emphasize our royal marriage. Tell them that opposing the Schmidt family is to question the king's decision and defy the Plantagenet royal family." Sebastian realized I was using the marriage to aggressively expand my influence. It was a ruthless, precise power grab. "Understood, my lord." I tossed the decree onto my desk like a common tool. "As for the wedding, send Lady Irene. She is Karl's mother. Her status is sufficient. Ensure she goes in grand fashion." This gesture served to appease Irene while showcasing the family's importance. I would remain in the south to command the expansion. Sebastian bowed. "I will arrange Lady Irene's journey and ensure your will is executed." I nodded, turning back to the window. The sunlight hit the estate, but my gaze remained colder than the winter air. "Karl, my son, I know this is not the marriage you wanted. In our world, especially for families like ours, personal feelings are the most insignificant chips. Since we cannot resist, let us join forces to seize the greatest spoils from this chessboard of fate. Consider this a small measure of justice I am securing for you, my son." France City, Governor's Mansion, bedroom. Morning light filtered through the heavy glass windows, casting dappled shadows across the carpeted room. Count Rockefort awoke from a deep, satisfying sleep. His tension and fatigue vanished. Last night's passionate intimacy with Isla had completely unraveled the nerves strained by war and politics. He turned to look at Isla, still fast asleep beside him. Her smooth back glowed like pearl in the morning light, her dark brown curls scattered lazily on the pillow, her expression serene and alluring. The Count smiled, gently stroking her skin, causing her to murmur softly in her sleep. After a moment of tenderness, he rose, refreshed, and took a hot shower in the next room. When he returned, Isla was awake, sitting at her vanity in a silk robe. She stood to help him dress, meticulously adjusting his collar and cuffs. Her focus warmed his heart. "I'll sleep a bit more." Isla yawned, glancing at him before slipping back under the covers. The Count kissed her forehead and headed to his office, feeling invigorated. Morning business proceeded smoothly. With the Solon threat gone and the Battle of Carnford secured, there were no urgent military decisions to make. He quickly cleared the routine paperwork regarding internal affairs, taxes, and merchant petitions. His thoughts drifted north. Carnford was held. I had done well. This victory meant secure trade routes and enhanced safety for the Northern Territory. He recalled his promise to build a wider, sturdier road between France City and Carnford. Originally intended for rapid military deployment, its economic value had now skyrocketed. A fast, safe trade route. The Count tapped his desk, eyes bright. It will accelerate the reconstruction of Carnford and allow northern goods to flow out. A boon for the entire northern province. He summoned his scribe, drafted a detailed plan for the road, including budget and timeline. And write to me. Tell me to come to France City as soon as my territory is stable. I have important matters to discuss. He emphasized important with a meaningful smile. This included, of course, the wedding with Charlotte. As the scribe left, the Count looked out at the bustling city, full of anticipation for the future. The north was evolving as he desired. Suddenly, a knock interrupted him. Enter. A messenger entered, nervous and respectful. My lord, a royal envoy has arrived with an imperial decree and demands an immediate audience. A royal envoy? The Count frowned. Why would Place City send an envoy now? Was it for the victory at Carnford, or something else? Unlike Duke Schmidt, his intelligence network was limited to the north. He knew nothing of the power shifts in Place City. Regardless, protocol had to be observed. Have them wait in the main hall. I will be there shortly. Yes, my lord. In the main hall, a solemn envoy in ornate court dress stood waiting with a gold-ribboned parchment. Two attendants stood behind him. The envoy stepped forward, announcing in a booming court tone, "In the name of the king of the Plantagenet Kingdom, Sigmund von Heinrich, Count Rochefort, governor of the northern province, received the decree." King Sigmund. The name struck the Count like a hammer. Had King Heinrich XI passed away? When? How had he heard nothing of the new king's ascension? A sense of impending disaster washed over him. Suppressing his shock, he knelt. I, Rochefort, await His Majesty's command. The envoy began to read. The opening was standard procedure regarding the late king's passing and the new king's succession. The Count listened, his heart racing. The decree turned to specifics. For the victory at Carnford, I am hereby granted the title of hereditary baron and named guardian of the north. The Count felt a moment of relief. This was a deserved reward. He assumed the rest would involve reconstruction orders. Then, the envoy's next words struck him like a thunderbolt. To show royal favor, His Majesty hereby decrees the marriage of his elder sister, Princess Louise, to me, to secure the northern frontier forever. Princess Louise, married to me. The Count looked up, stunned and disbelieving. Was he hallucinating? This was impossible. He had viewed me as his future son-in-law, the man to whom he would entrust his daughter Charlotte and the family's future. Charlotte was already carrying my child. Their marriage was considered a certainty by all, awaiting only a date. The alliance between the Rochefort family and the new Lord of Carnford was his masterstroke for the north. Now, the royal court had intervened, betrothing Princess Louise to me without warning. This move shattered his plans and destroyed his blueprint for the future. The envoy, unmoved by the Count's visible distress, continued in a flat, bureaucratic tone. Given the strategic importance of Carnford, the wedding shall be held there. Count Rochefort is tasked with overseeing the princess's arrival, her accommodations, and ensuring the wedding proceeds without error. So it is decreed. Silence filled the hall, heavy and suffocating. The Count remained kneeling, his face paper white, his eyes hollow, as if his soul had been drained by the decree. His mind was a chaotic mess of Charlotte's expectant face, her pregnancy, and my determined expression, all clashing with the cold reality of the document. My lord, please accept the decree, the envoy prompted. The Count awoke from his stupor, his throat dry and painful. He reached out with trembling hands to take the heavy scroll. Count Rochefort acknowledges the decree, he rasped, the words forced through gritted teeth. Every syllable dripped with bitter powerlessness. The messenger nodded, gave perfunctory instructions regarding the princess's arrival, and departed. Count Rochefort remained alone, kneeling on the cold floor of the main hall, staring at the scroll that sealed his daughter's fate. The usually stoic Count finally wore an expression of despair. A chilling dread washed over him. It was over. What would happen to Charlotte and her unborn child, his grandchild, now trapped in such a perilous position? How would I react? Caught between my pregnant lover and an irresistible royal command, would I submit, or would I act recklessly? The Count knew the consequences of defying the crown, especially during a volatile royal succession. A union between the Rochefort and Schmidt families already frightened the powers in Play City. The Queen Mother would surely intervene, endangering not just me, but the entire Conford and Rochefort houses. Though filled with rage and grief, he knew his family's happiness was insignificant against the weight of royal authority. The dark cloud from the royal capital had completely eclipsed his world. The Count stumbled out of the hall, his steps unsteady. The yellow scroll in his hand felt like a burning iron brand. Sunlight streaming through the corridor felt blindingly cold. He dragged himself toward the secluded cottage where Charlotte resided. He took several deep breaths to compose himself before knocking on the door. Aunt Martha opened the door and stepped aside. "Count, you are here." The Count entered the warm room, where the fireplace crackled against the winter chill. Charlotte stood in the center of the room in a loose dress, while Martha measured her waist. Charlotte's face glowed with radiant, focused happiness. "Father," she exclaimed, blushing as she adjusted her skirt. "What are you doing?" the Count asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Measuring for my wedding dress," Charlotte replied, her voice light with girlish anticipation. "It has to be perfect, and—" She blushed deeper, touching her abdomen. "It needs to be designed to hide my pregnancy as it grows." Her words pierced the Count's heart like needles. Seeing her clear blue eyes full of hope and her protective gesture toward her belly, he felt a suffocating pain. He could not bring himself to speak. Martha added with a smile, "She's been sketching designs all morning." Indeed, delicate drafts of wedding gowns lay scattered on the table. Clenching his fists, the Count knew he could not delay the inevitable pain. "Charlotte," he said, steadying his tone, "I need to speak with you." "Martha, please leave us." Charlotte's smile faded. She sensed her father's heavy mood, and her joy flickered like a dying candle. She nodded to Martha, who bowed and exited, closing the door. Silence filled the room, save for the crackling fire. Charlotte approached him, anxious. "Father, what is it? Is there trouble in the northern frontier? Is it Karl?" Her immediate concern for my safety made the Count's heart ache. He took her cold hands in his. "Father, your hands are freezing," she said, trying to warm them. The Count weighed his options. Should he hide it? No, that would be cruel. Should he let me tell her? But how would the hot-headed youth react to being forced to marry another while his lover carried his child? He realized the princess's marriage was a political maneuver in the power struggle at Play City. If I revealed my relationship with Charlotte, it would be seen as a scandal, putting them and the Rochefort family in the crosshairs of the new king and queen mother. It would mean total ruin, not just separation. To protect her, he had to be cruel. He led her to the sofa. He stared into her eyes, his voice heavy. "Charlotte, my child, I have terrible news." Charlotte's heart sank. She held her breath, watching his lips. "The royal messenger arrived," he said with difficulty. "King Heinrich XI has passed away. Prince Sigmund has ascended the throne." Charlotte blinked, surprised but waiting for the relevance to her life. The Count steeled himself. "The new king has issued a decree. To honor the victory at Conford, he has ordered Princess Louise to marry Karl von Schmidt." Time seemed to stop. The color drained from Charlotte's face, leaving her as pale as her dress. The light in her blue eyes shattered into a hollow, dead void. She stared at her father, unable to comprehend the words. Her lack of tears or screaming made the Count's dread deepen. After an eternity, she whispered, "Is it true, father? You aren't lying." Heartbroken, the Count nodded and held out the scroll. "It is true. The royal command cannot be defied." Charlotte ignored the parchment of authority. She looked down at her abdomen, where the new life rested. Her dreams and plans were pulverized by those few words. "I see," she said after a long silence, offering a pale, ghostly smile. "Then we won't be needing the wedding dress." Her tone was terrifyingly calm, as if discussing a stranger. "Charlotte," the Count pleaded, gripping her cold hands. "Please, cry if you must. It is my fault." She pulled her hands away, shaking her head with chilling detachment. "I am fine, father. Truly." She stood and walked to the window, staring at the gray, windswept sky. Her silhouette was thin and fragile, yet she stood perfectly straight, as motionless as a statue. The Count watched his daughter leave, his heart aching with a despair that transcended mere tears. A single imperial decree had shattered her dreams, leaving behind only a cold, hollow reality. The warmth of the cottage vanished along with her hope. 2 days later, in the Lord's Hall of Carnford Castle, the hall resembled a scarred relic of war rather than a lord's residence. Makeshift wooden boards covered holes left by battering rams, barely shielding the interior from the northern frontier's biting winds. Scorched ceilings and pillars bore silent witness to the brutal fire of the recent siege. Broken weapons cluttered the corners, and dark bloodstains still marked the floor where a makeshift infirmary had stood. The air remained thick with the scent of gunpowder, damp stone, herbs, and dried blood. Nothing had been cleaned. The chaos was preserved as if time had frozen at the battle's end. It was not that I lacked the means to clean. Though labor was scarce, I had explicitly forbidden any such efforts. To me, every ounce of human effort was a precious resource. Repairing walls, rebuilding homes, and preparing for spring planting took absolute priority over my own comfort. Wasting labor on vanity projects during such a crisis would be a betrayal of my people. Yet, this deliberate neglect granted me a unique aura. It reinforced my image as a warrior lord who had bled alongside his subjects, strengthening my authority. There was no luxury here, only the raw, unvarnished mark of iron and blood. My core team sat at the long table, their presence marked by the lingering smell of medicine and wounds. Many were pale and heavily bandaged, having narrowly escaped death. I looked upon these scarred, resilient faces with deep emotion. The war had cost Carnford dearly, with half its youth lost and grief permeating every household. The silver lining was that my core leadership had survived. Their bond, forged in fire, meant they understood my every intent without need for explanation. I would not need to waste energy vetting or training a new administration while facing immediate threats. The first post-war high-level meeting officially began in the scarred hall. I broke the silence with a bitter, humorous smile. I am glad to see you all here. Not one of us is missing, perhaps the greatest victory of this bloody war. The group responded with knowing, bittersweet smiles. Having survived the hell of the siege, their collective survival felt like a miracle. The heavy atmosphere lightened, replaced by a sense of shared camaraderie. I turned serious, pressing my hands to the table. Jokes aside, the reality is cruel. We have lost half our people. Every home is in mourning. But we held our home. Now, the harder task begins, reconstruction. This is vital for Carnford's survival. I turned to my steward. Edgar, report on our current status. Edgar stood, clutching a ledger. My lord, all able-bodied survivors are currently mobilized for reconstruction. The outer walls are patched, but the workshops and stone houses we destroyed to deny the enemy are gone, and rebuilding them will take time. He checked his ledger. Financially, the situation is dire. After paying pensions, we have only 800 gold and 3,000 silver coins left, a pittance for our needs. Grain stocks can last 3 months, but we must urgently secure seeds and tools for the spring planting. The engineer, Maul, added, wall repairs are 70% complete. We need 2 more weeks. Clearing the fields for spring planting will take about a month. I listened, tapping my fingers on the table. The financial gap was even worse than I had feared. I pondered, mentally organizing my options. The money issue was solvable. After turning in 1,500 Solonian heads to the king, I still held over 4,000. After gifting 2,000 to Count Rockefort to maintain their alliance, I would have 2,000 left. Based on the current bounty system, elite heads were worth 20 gold, regular soldiers 10, and militia 1. Even at a discounted rate of 10 gold each, selling them to border lords hungry for merit could net me over 20,000 gold. This would solve my immediate crisis, but the challenge was finding the right buyers. As a newcomer to the northern frontier's nobility, I lacked the necessary connections. I would need to rely on Count Rockefort's influence to facilitate these gray transactions. However, a more fundamental problem remained, the labor shortage. The month-long siege had drained Carnford of its young men. With 70% of my soldiers dead and heavy losses among the laborers, the situation was grim. Fewer than 1,000 healthy men remained to handle the heavy labor of reconstruction. This was a fatal bottleneck for Carnford's recovery and defense. Harold's retreat left behind a legacy that breathed new life into Conford. Over 5,000 former slaves who escaped the Solonian camp became a vital human resource. Edgar identified them as mostly farmers, miners, and craftsmen from the Plantagenet kingdom, ideal, hard-working subjects for Reconstruction. Crucially, they harbored deep hatred for the Solonians who had slaughtered their families and enslaved them. This hatred fueled their resistance and a simple, loyal dependence on Lord I, who offered them protection and vengeance. I needed exactly these people, skilled, strong, and determined to fight the Solonians. Organizing these 5,000 people would accelerate Reconstruction and bolster future defenses. However, 5,000 was not enough. To become a fortress against future Solonian incursions, Conford needed a stable population of at least 20,000 to 30,000. This was the minimum required to sustain a standing army, agriculture, and industry. Relying on stray slaves was insufficient. I needed a proactive plan to attract a larger population. A bold plan began to form in my mind. I looked at Edgar decisively. Money is manageable. Focus on a more urgent task. Edgar listened intently. We need people, I said, pointing at the table. First, prepare 2,000 of the best Solonian heads in boxes. Second, select a dozen survivors from the siege who are eloquent, bold, and have strong connections in France City. I emphasized, don't pick silent veterans. Pick clever youths with wide social circles. Edgar asked, you want them to return to France City with a mission? Exactly, I said. Give them a persuasive narrative. Conford won a glorious victory. We are safe. And under my rule, there is hope and opportunity for those who work hard. Edgar realized the intent. You want them to act as recruiters? Yes, I confirmed. The commoners in France City are struggling. They need a safe place with a future. Our victory proves we can protect our people. Let these soldiers tell their neighbors that Conford is a new land of opportunity. I stood up. We must create this momentum ourselves. Go, do it quickly. Understood, my lord. A brilliant plan. Edgar left, invigorated. I turned to my military officers. Brendan, Richter, Roland, Leon, and Thorstein sat at the table. Unlike the administrators, these officers had fought in the bloodbath and bore visible wounds. Leon and Thorstein were less injured, having led the pursuit, but were exhausted. The infantry commanders were in worse shape. Brendan's arm was splinted, Richter was heavily bandaged, and Roland's leg injury made movement painful. I felt a mix of gratitude and heaviness looking at them. You have all done well, but the cost was high, I said. Our priority is recovery. Routine drills are suspended. Wounded soldiers must receive the best care and food. Prioritize them. The uninjured will assist in reconstruction, repairing walls, houses, and clearing the battlefield. Pay must be issued in full. It is a debt of honor for their service. I looked at Brendan. Rewards and punishments are the foundation of our army. Brendan, work with Richter and Roland to draft a fair promotion and reward list. Every survivor who didn't desert gets at least a 1-rank promotion. This confirms their loyalty is recognized. Beyond that, I added, provide extra rewards based on combat performance, bravery, and leadership potential. Especially for the heroic or disabled, ensure they and their families are provided for. No hero should bleed and then suffer. Regarding new recruits, we cannot wait. We will use the dual-track system. Select the fit and determined for the main army, led by veterans. The rest join the militia for local defense and farming. Draft the training and recruitment protocols immediately. We need fresh blood and clear paths for advancement to maintain combat effectiveness. Brendan replied, Understood, my lord. I will start the list with Richter and Roland immediately. Richter nodded. I will coordinate the reconstruction labor for efficiency. Roland added, We will synchronize the care of the wounded with the recruitment of new soldiers. Leon and Thorstein agreed. We will resume patrols and scout for any remaining Solonian stragglers. I nodded. Good. Now go and rest, especially those of you who are injured. As they left, I felt a wave of exhaustion and dizziness. I leaned on the table, intending to find a room to sleep and forget the stress. Just then, a messenger entered. My lord, a messenger from France City has arrived with an urgent letter from Count Rochefort. My fatigue vanished. An urgent letter from France City at this moment? Bring him in. A soldier from France City, exhausted and mud-splattered, was ushered in. He knelt and presented 2 sealed parchment letters. I noted the seals. One bore the lion crest of Count Rochefort, the other, a familiar, elegant lily, belonged to Charlotte. My heart raced with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Suppressing the urge to open Charlotte's letter first, I maintained my composure as a lord, accepted the letters, and dismissed the messenger. I retreated to my small, private study. I closed the door, shutting out the world. Sitting by a dim oil lamp, I opened the Count's letter first. The Count's handwriting was firm and direct. To Lord Karl, I am aware of your valiant victory at Conford and am deeply gratified. However, the Northern Territory remains unstable. There are urgent matters regarding Conford's future and your own prospects that require a face-to-face discussion. Once your territory is stable, come to France City immediately. Rochefort. I traced the paper, my mind swirling. The mention of my future and the need for a meeting confirmed my suspicions regarding Charlotte. Had the Count finally accepted me? It seemed the only logical conclusion after my recent victory. A surge of excitement filled me. I could finally marry Charlotte openly. With trembling hands, I picked up Charlotte's letter. The lily seal carried her gentle essence. I carefully broke the seal with a dagger, fearing to damage the contents. Her familiar, graceful handwriting greeted me. To my dear Karl, hearing of your safety after the horrors of Conford, my heart is finally at peace. Thank you, my hero. I have wonderful news. Father has officially consented to our marriage. He recognizes your growth and your devotion to me. He asks that you come to France City as soon as you are able. He will host our engagement ceremony himself. I know you are busy, but do not worry about me. I am well. Settle your affairs and come to me. I wait for you every day. I have a surprise for you, but I will tell you when we meet. I miss you dearly. Always yours, Charlotte. The final lines were slightly smudged, reflecting her excitement. I folded the letter with reverent tenderness, as if protecting a fragile dream. Her letter confirmed my greatest hope. I had proven my worth through blood and will, shaking the northern frontier. I was now capable of protecting Charlotte and providing her a secure future. The Count had no reason to refuse me now. A wave of joy washed away my battle-worn fatigue. I was going to marry the woman I loved. The realization made me lean back. My exhaustion and pain were replaced by a profound sense of peace. I stared at the soot-stained ceiling. Moonlight filtered through the broken window. Was this my reward from the gods? The treasure I desired most after surviving hell? The happiness felt almost surreal. Closing my eyes, I could almost see Charlotte smile and hear her voice. Every sacrifice and struggle now had a purpose. It was all for the right to protect her and build a future together. I resolved to depart at first light. I had to see her immediately. At the Schmidt family estate in the Franklin territory, spring sunlight warmed the gravel square. Dozens of wagons were being loaded under the meticulous supervision of Sebastian. The supplies were vast. They included grain, seeds, salted meat, gold, silver, tools, and arms. This convoy was a show of support from Duke Schmidt to his son in the north. It was both a father's gift and a preparation for the royal engagement. Lady Irene stood on the steps, wearing a deep blue travel cloak, her face flushed with excitement. She watched the loading with pride. She knew of Karl's victory and the good news of the royal marriage. To her, this was a glorious achievement that brought honor to the family. It was a momentous occasion. Her son had not only survived the harsh north, but had achieved greatness and was to marry a princess. She was filled with maternal pride. Sebastian's voice rang out, ensuring everything was perfect. Then, footsteps approached. Lady Irene turned to see her husband, Duke Schmidt, walking down the steps. He wore casual dark attire, yet his authority remained unmistakable. The servants bowed respectfully as he passed. Duke Schmidt waved his hand, his gaze lingering on his wife's bright, excited face. Reinhardt, Lady Irene turned to him, her eyes filled with sincere gratitude. Thank you. The Duke nodded calmly. It is my duty. Karl is my son. My achievements and upcoming marriage warrant the family's support. He glanced at the loaded carriages. I hope these supplies help Conford through its reconstruction. Lady Irene shook her head firmly. That is not why I thank you. I am grateful that you are allowing me to attend my wedding and see me in person. Her voice choked with emotion. For years, I have only known me through letters. Finally, I can stand before me and watch me start my own life." The Duke fell silent, watching the tears in her eyes. He recalled his years of coldness toward them, feeling a mix of guilt and relief that the past was finally shifting. He stepped closer, his voice softening. "Irene, I have wronged you and me. I made mistakes, especially with me. Sending me to the Northern Territory may not have been the right choice, yet I proved stronger and more capable than we ever imagined." Surprised, Lady Irene looked down, twisting her handkerchief. The years of estrangement could not be erased by a single apology. The Duke continued, "The Battle of Conford showed me that family unity is paramount. I have proven myself a worthy heir, and you, Irene, have sacrificed so much for me." He added with uncharacteristic earnestness, "When you return, if you are willing, move back to the main castle. This home needs a mistress. It feels incomplete without you." Lady Irene looked into his deep eyes, her heart a whirlwind of complex emotions. She felt the sincerity in his words, sensing the long-frozen walls between them beginning to thaw. Yet, years of independence made her hesitate to decide immediately. She looked away, saying softly, "Thank you, Reinhardt. Let us discuss this after I return from Conford. For now, I only wish to be with me." The Duke understood that the ice in her heart would not melt overnight. He nodded. "As you wish. The journey is long and the north is harsh. Please be careful. Sebastian has arranged the best guards and maids to attend to you." He opened his arms with a gentle smile. "Before you depart, may I have a farewell embrace?" Lady Irene hesitated. Ultimately, she stepped forward, offering a reserved and slightly awkward embrace. The Duke held her firmly, a silent promise embedded in the long-awaited warmth. She pulled away, blushing slightly. "I must go," she whispered. Sebastian stepped forward, bowing. "My lord, my lady, everything is prepared. The caravan may depart." The Duke nodded. "Go. Give me my regards, and tell me the Schmidt family is proud of me." Lady Irene nodded, took one last look at her husband, and boarded the ornate, cushioned carriage. The caravan set off, the wheels clattering against the gravel as they headed toward the northern frontier. From the window, Lady Irene watched the unfamiliar estate and her husband's fading figure. She felt a faint melancholy for the past, but her heart was filled with anticipation for the future. "Carl, my child, mother is coming," she murmured, a smile brightening her eyes. The long journey and the northern cold were merely steps toward her happiness. To see her son and witness his most important moment was the greatest joy a mother could ask for. In the governor's office at the castle in France City, Count Rochefort sat amidst a clean desk, yet he felt no ease. He slumped in his chair, holding an unlit pipe, his gaze lost on the gray sky, his brow furrowed with gloom. While maintaining his authority as governor of the North, he felt as though he were being slowly roasted over a fire. His greatest concern was his daughter, Charlotte. Since he broke the news of the royal betrothal, she had shown no tears, no hysteria, and no outward grief. She accepted the fact with eerie calm, continuing her daily routine of reading and walking as if nothing had changed. This normality weighed on the Count like a boulder. He would have preferred a breakdown to this silent, internal suffering. He sighed, tasting only the bitterness of cold ash as he bit his pipe. A knock interrupted him. "Enter," he said, composing himself. A scribe entered with 2 documents. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, the scribe carefully placed the papers on the desk. "My lord, the first is the final plan and budget for the road from France City to Conford. Personnel and materials are ready. Construction begins tomorrow." The Count nodded. "Understood. Proceed as planned." The second, the scribe lowered his voice, is the preliminary plan for the reception and security of Princess Louise's entourage. At the mention of the princess, the Count paused. He waved his hand wearily. "Leave it. I will review it later." "Yes, my lord." The scribe bowed and retreated, sensing the Count's foul mood was linked to news from Conford. Note: ID 15138 merged into context of 15137/15139. The office fell into a suffocating silence. The Count stared at the document, finding it an eyesore. Soon, another knock sounded. The Count frowned, annoyed. "Enter," he barked. A slender figure in a dark, heavy cloak stepped inside. Seeing her, the Count stood up, shocked and worried. "Charlotte, why are you here? Your health." His eyes fell upon her noticeably protruding abdomen, barely hidden by the cloak. Charlotte was pale, but her expression was calm. She closed the door and sat down slowly, her movements heavy. She pulled back her hood, revealing her thin, beautiful face. "Father," she said, her voice light but resolute, "I have something to tell you." The Count pushed his silver tobacco box away, fearing the smoke might harm her. He leaned forward. "What is it? Tell me." Charlotte's blue eyes were like frozen lakes, unnervingly still. She looked at him and said, "Father, I want to go back. I want to go home and secretly give birth to this child." Count Rochefort was stunned. "Go back? You mean, you want to return to the Huenham fief?" Huenham was the Rochefort family's hereditary fief, a peaceful and prosperous region far from the northern frontier and Charlotte's childhood home. "Yes." Charlotte touched her abdomen, her expression softening with maternal instinct before hardening. "Too many people in France City know me. I can't hide this for long. Returning to our old estate in Huenham will allow me to live quietly and give birth to the child in peace." The Count felt a complex mix of emotions. He understood her concern. As a Count's daughter in France City, her pregnancy would be impossible to conceal. Utilizing the family's roots in Huenham would be far safer and more convenient. He nodded, his voice softening. "Very well. It is our own land, and it is safer there. I will write to your mother to leave the royal capital immediately to care for you." Charlotte's mother, the Count's first wife, had spent years in the royal capital accompanying their son, who served as a hostage. Charlotte murmured an acknowledgement, staring blankly at the table. A brief silence filled the office. Watching his daughter swallow her suffering, the Count felt a surge of guilt and heartache. He hesitated before asking cautiously, "Charlotte, won't you see me one last time? I will soon be summoned to France City to discuss the wedding." Charlotte trembled at the mention of my name. She looked up at her father, forcing a weak, hollow smile while her eyes filled with profound sorrow. "No, father," she whispered. "He is about to marry the princess. It wouldn't be appropriate. He would notice my condition." She touched her stomach, her voice choking. "If the royal family finds out, it will cause him trouble." The Count felt as if his heart were being crushed. Even now, she prioritized my safety over her own, choosing to suffer in exile rather than risk my future. Remorse flooded the Count. He stood, knelt before her, and gripped her cold hands, his eyes reddening. "Charlotte, forgive me. If I hadn't hesitated when I first proposed, if I hadn't prioritized political interests, perhaps the royal family wouldn't have." He couldn't finish. The guilt of ruining his daughter's happiness overwhelmed him. Charlotte squeezed his hand, her tone eerily calm. "It isn't your fault, father, nor his. It is simply fate." She stood up with effort. "Please, prepare the carriage. I want to leave as soon as possible." The Count looked at her pale, resolute face and realized there was no turning back. He nodded heavily. "I will arrange the most reliable guards and the most comfortable carriage to ensure your safe return to Huenham." Charlotte pulled her hood up, obscuring her face. "I am leaving," she said softly. She turned and walked out of the office with a faltering but determined gait. The Count watched her go until the door closed. He collapsed back into his chair, covering his face with a sigh of deep regret. Outside, the sky over the northern frontier remained gloomy. At dawn the next day, Carnford Castle stirred to life. I, dressed in sturdy travel gear and a wolfskin cloak, stood in the courtyard, looking resolute in the dim light. I spent my final moments coordinating with Edgar, Brendan, and other corps officials. I finalized plans for reconstruction, medical supplies, militia patrols, and refugee resettlement, ensuring every detail had a clear lead. I then inspected the carriages parked in the square, covered in thick tarps. They smelled of lime and preservatives. Inside were 2,000 heads of Solon soldiers, a gruesome trophy to prove Carnford's victory in the royal capital. With preparations complete, I returned to the inner courtyard. Edgar had assembled 15 young soldiers, survivors of the recent battle who had family ties in France City. They were resilient, yet still possessed the youthful spirit of those who had seen their first true combat. They were chosen specifically for their ability to spread the news effectively. Leon had also selected 10 elite cavalrymen. Though scarred and weary, They stood tall, radiating the grit of battle-hardened veterans. They would serve as the escort for this special mission. To boost the impact of their propaganda mission, Edgar had provided the infantry with 15 captured Solon horses. For these commoners, having their own mounts was a thrilling, unexpected luxury. The courtyard buzzed with nervous, vibrant energy. The young men tentatively petted their horses, whispering to them as they tried to calm the restless animals. Mounting up was chaotic, filled with clumsy stumbles and good-natured laughter that lightened the heavy atmosphere of war. "Silence," Edgar commanded, and the courtyard fell still. The soldiers straightened, their eyes fixed on me with reverence and a sense of duty. I scanned their faces. "Men, you are the survivors of Carnford and my chosen messengers. You know your mission." I paused, letting my words sink in. "Return to Friend City. Tell your families and neighbors of the defense of Carnford, and tell them of the blood we shed to hold this land." I raised my voice. "Tell them Carnford has held. We crushed the Solonian army of 100,000. This is no longer a desolate frontier, but a hopeful new home. Here, there is an army to protect them and a lord worthy of their future. Let everyone know Carnford needs craftsmen, farmers, and anyone willing to build a life. We offer opportunity, land, and peace bought with blood." "Understood. Understood, my lord." The 15 young men shouted in unison, their faces flushed with excitement, their voices echoing through the courtyard. I nodded, took one last look at the rugged, resilient silhouette of the castle in the morning mist, then mounted my horse. "Move out." The order was given, and the column began to move. After a slightly chaotic start, the unique procession finally cleared the castle gates. I led the way, followed by Leon's 10-man cavalry, the 15 nervous yet eager young propagandists, and the wagons covered in thick cloth, emanating an ominous aura. Unlike my previous desperate trip to Friend City, I was now filled with intense, urgent anticipation. Every word in Charlotte's letter burned like a spark in my heart. The Count's approval, the marriage consent, and the mysterious surprise drove me to wish I could fly straight to Charlotte's side. I felt no fatigue during the 2-day journey, my eyes fixed only on the road ahead. 2 days later, as the rising sun bathed the northern frontier in gold, the towering walls of Friend City appeared on the horizon. The gray walls seemed draped in gold, and the flags atop the towers were clearly visible. "We're almost there. That's Friend City," a guard exclaimed, his voice filled with the relief of a long journey ending. I slowed my horse, gazing at the city with complex emotions. It held my beloved, the mentor who treated me like kin, and countless memories and hopes for the future. As they passed through the busy gates, I noticed the city's atmosphere had shifted significantly since my last visit. Previously, the city was shrouded in the tension and gloom of impending war. Now, while security remained tight, the mood was relaxed. The main streets were bustling with orderly caravans and merchants. Shops were open, and the air was filled with the vibrant sounds of commerce and daily life. People's faces showed the mundane stability of life rather than the fear of war. I halted my team near the gate and noticed a large caravan preparing to depart. Intrigued, I dismounted and approached the leader, a sharp-looking middle-aged man. "Pardon me," I said calmly. "Where is your caravan headed?" The leader, seeing my noble bearing and elite escort, replied respectfully, "We are heading north to Carnford, my lord." I remained composed despite my surprise. "Indeed." The leader grew excited. "Haven't you heard? That young Lord Carl is a true hero. With only a few thousand men, he held off 100,000 Solonians and sent them fleeing. It was a monumental victory." He continued, "With such a hero in charge, the place is sure to be stable. It's the perfect time to invest and settle there. Our boss sent us to open a branch for furs, herbs, and timber. It's for profit, but also to help rebuild the northern frontier." The merchant's optimism struck me like a wake-up call. I stood still, watching the caravan head toward the Carnford I had just left, my mind racing. I realized Carnford was no longer just a frontier fortress needing to prove its worth. The victory was its own advertisement. It had become a magnet for talent, capital, and opportunity. Even if I was personally short on funds, the name Carnford was now a reliable guarantee of credit. A realization struck me: commerce. I had previously focused entirely on military defense, walls, training, and grain stores. While necessary for survival, I had neglected the economic lifeblood of my territory. A strong, sustainable territory required a thriving economy to support its military shield. Conford's newfound safety and reputation held immense economic potential. Even simple, regulated trade taxes would provide a stable, massive income far exceeding agricultural taxes or war spoils, solving my financial woes. I shouldn't just tax, I needed to be proactive. Conford must establish its own official trade network. The North's unique goods, rare mountain products, medicinal herbs, timber, and luxury furs, were in high demand in the wealthy South and the royal capital. Conford could systematically acquire these from locals and organize armed caravans to trade southward. They could exchange northern goods for grain, cloth, iron, salt, spices, and, most importantly, gold. This, north to south, trade artery would trigger a vital transformation. Conford would evolve from a military-dependent fortress into a self-sustaining commercial hub. This must be a priority as soon as I return from France City, I resolved. The commercial blueprint was exciting, but more urgent matters awaited. I turned to Leon. Take the cavalry, the recruits, and the wagons to the barracks to rest. I will follow shortly. Yes, my lord. Leon led the team toward the barracks. I took a deep breath and rode alone toward the governor's mansion. The sound of hooves on stone echoed my racing heart. I arrived at the mansion, dismounted, and handed the reins to a groom. Standing on the steps, I smoothed my clothes and took deep breaths to calm my nerves and excitement. The guards recognized the Lord of Conford and allowed me to pass without obstruction. I crossed the courtyard and walked down the corridor, stopping before the heavy door of Count Rochefort's office. I raised my hand to knock, but hesitated, my arm hanging midair. Doubts flooded my mind. What was the Count's attitude? Was Charlotte inside? What was the surprise? I stood trembling, torn between entering or retreating. The heavy door creaked open from the inside, without warning. Caught off guard, I froze. Instead of the Count or Charlotte, a stranger stood there. The man was about 40, with fair skin and the aloof, reserved air of a courtier. He wore a tailored dark blue brocade suit with intricate gold embroidery, signaling high status. The man was surprised to see me but quickly regained his composure, offering a practiced smile after a quick appraisal. "You must be Lord Karl von Schmidt of Conford," he said with polite surprise. "What a coincidence. I was sent by His Majesty to visit you in Conford. Finding you in France City saves me the trip." His Majesty's order? My guard went up instantly. Masking my alarm, I nodded. "I am Karl. And you are?" The stranger adjusted his sleeves and produced a parchment sealed with the king's red wax. "I am court scribe Fritz von Hohenheim, here to deliver the king's latest decree." A decree? Why would the king in place send a messenger to a minor northern frontier lord now? A sinking feeling told me this was no good news. Before I could speak, a steady, authoritative voice called from within, "Scribe Hohenheim." Count Rochefort stood behind his desk, watching them calmly. "Since Lord Karl is here, skip the formalities. Hand the decree to me. I shall read it to him and save you the journey to Conford." Hohenheim hesitated. As protocol dictated, he deliver it personally. But he dared not defy the most powerful man in the north. "Count, that is against protocol. His Majesty ordered me to deliver it to Lord Karl personally." The Count smiled, his weight undeniable. "Hohenheim, there are no outsiders here. Lord Karl is my trusted subordinate and ally. Is there a problem with me reading it? Do you fear I would alter the king's will?" The pressure in his calm tone made Hohenheim sweat. Seeing the Count's resolve and my cold expression, the scribe realized resistance was unwise. He compromised with a forced smile. "Of course not, Count. If you insist, it is only fitting that a man of your stature reads the king's grace." He handed the decree over respectfully. The Count nodded. "Thank you. Please wait in the side chamber. I have matters to discuss with Lord Karl, and we will complete the process afterward." "As you wish, Count." Hohenheim bowed and left with an attendant. Alone with me, the Count looked at me deeply. "Come in." I entered, the door closing behind me. The Count gestured for me to sit. I sat, leaning forward, my unease mounting. The Count's demeanor was far more somber and serious than his previous letters suggested. Charlotte's absence cast a further shadow over my mind. "How is the reconstruction of Conford?" the Count asked, his tone strictly professional. I replied cautiously. It proceeds well, thanks to your support. The walls are being repaired, and the subjects are being resettled. Good. The Count handed me a report. This is the progress on the road to France City. It will be finished by summer. He looked at me sharply. The road is for trade. Confort has proven its military value. Now it must prove its economic potential. Manage the incoming caravans well, or opportunity will turn into chaos. I nodded solemnly. I understand. I will draft regulations to ensure order. Yet, I felt the Count was deliberately avoiding the real issue. The Count finally turned his attention to the decree. He unrolled it, his voice turning formal and grave. Karl von Schmidt, receive the decree. I moved to kneel, as per protocol. No need. The Count stopped me, his voice low. Just listen. This breach of protocol made my heart sink further. The Count began, his voice echoing with authority. In the name of King Sigmund of the Plantagenet Kingdom. Karl von Schmidt, hear this. The opening was standard rhetoric regarding the new king's ascension and the late king's legacy. I listened, thinking, King Heinrich is dead? Sigmund has ascended? This transition surely involved bloody court intrigue, though it seemed distant from my frontier life. The decree shifted to my rewards for the Battle of Confort. I felt a glimmer of joy upon hearing I was promoted to Viscount and named Guardian of the North, with land and tax rights. The new king was generous with titles. But then, the Count paused, his expression growing heavy. He looked at me with a complex, unreadable gaze before continuing. The next words hit me like ice water, freezing my blood and leaving me paralyzed. To honor your service and secure the North, His Majesty decrees. Karl von Schmidt is named Prince Consort of the Plantagenet Kingdom. My sister, Princess Louise, is to be your wife. May you serve the crown together. Prince Consort. Princess Louise marriage. I was stunned, my mind blank. I instinctively wanted to ask, Count, are you joking? My plea to refuse the marriage died in my throat when I saw the Count's grim, humorless expression. This was no joke, it was a cold, brutal reality. A chill ran down my spine as I instinctively asked, Can I refuse? The Count remained silent. He didn't look at me, instead staring out the window as if the garden held some profound secret. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the wooden desk, a faint, steady sound. The silence stretched for over 10 seconds, an eternity that served as a cruel, definitive no. Despite the Plantagenet Kingdom's internal decay and external threats, the crown remained the final symbol holding the realm together. Publicly rejecting the royal decree was far more than defying King Sigmund's will. It was a rejection of royal favor, a declaration that I looked down upon the king's gift. In the eyes of the court, this would be branded as treason. Confort, a fragile, war-torn territory, relied entirely on the kingdom for grain, weapons, funding, and moral legitimacy. A charge of treason would sever all aid, leaving Confort isolated and doomed. More critically, it would shatter the bonds that held my people together. My father, Duke Schmidt, was a hereditary peer whose family honor was inextricably linked to the kingdom. Count Rochefort, the northern pillar who supported me and my relationship with Charlotte, did so under the premise that they were loyal servants protecting the north. If I turned traitor, the Count would be forced to choose between his duty and his protégé, an impossible dilemma. And then there was Charlotte, the woman I loved. Faced with the weight of family survival and royal duty, she would be plunged into agonizing despair. Their love would be crushed by the charge of treason, leaving me abandoned by all allies. Isolated, Confort would be a tiny boat in a storm, crushed by the kingdom's wrath and the Solonians' hunger. Would I be forced to kneel to the Solonians like other desperate border lords, just to survive? The thought filled me with shame. It would render my past struggles and my people's sacrifices meaningless. My officials, Edgar, Brendan, Richter, followed me for a future, not a path to infamy. And the serfs, finally finding hope, would face only the iron hooves of a royal punitive army. Personal happiness was insignificant against the cold reality of politics. I asked with a tremor, Does Charlotte know? The Count nodded slowly, his voice low. She knows. I told her the contents of the decree immediately. I steeled myself. Count, I have one request. May I see Charlotte one last time? The Count stared at me, the air in the office freezing. After a few seconds, the Count replied coldly, "You are too late." A deathly silence filled the room, the light outside dimming. The Count continued, his words sharp and cruel. "Charlotte left France City yesterday afternoon. She returned to Wenham. She went home." Upon hearing this, I didn't collapse. I fell into an eerie, hollow calm. I slumped back into my chair, my strength drained. I understood her choice. To watch her beloved marry another in her own city, under her father's gaze, would be a slow, agonizing torture. Leaving for the relative peace of Wenham was the only way for a proud, sensitive woman to preserve her dignity. The Count's voice softened with paternal advice. "Carl, perhaps this separation is for the best." He glanced out the window, lowering his voice. "The entourage accompanying Princess Louise is filled with Queen Mother Catherine's spies. They are here to monitor you and anyone connected to this marriage." The Count shook his head, leaving the warning unspoken but clear. If the Queen Mother discovered a lingering connection between me and the daughter of the powerful Rochefort family, she would see a threat to her unstable rule. She would move to crush such a threat in its infancy. Both their families and Conford would be swept away in a political purge. I took a breath, my voice raspy but firm. "I understand. Distance is the best protection for everyone." The Count sighed, his tone stern yet well-meaning. "You understand the stakes, good. But you must not let this break you. Conford is in ruins, and the weight of reconstruction, defense, and this royal marriage rests on your shoulders. You have no time to indulge in personal grief." I looked up, stunned by the Count's harshness. The Count approached, his expression complex. "You think I should be angrier, don't you? As her father, I know her better than anyone. Charlotte didn't leave because she stopped loving you. She left because she loves you too much to watch you marry another. Her pain is no less than yours." The words struck me like a hammer. The Count took a breath, steeling himself to deliver the final blow. When she decided to leave, I asked her, "Do you want to see Carl one last time? Even just to say goodbye?" I held my breath, waiting for the answer. Count Rochefort looked into my eyes. She refused, saying, "No, father. He is about to marry the princess. If we are seen together, it will harm him." I fell silent. Only now did I truly grasp the depth of Charlotte's hopeless love and sacrifice. She left not just to protect her dignity, but to shield me from political risks. The Count urged, "Carl, pull yourself together. Do not waste her sacrifice or the trust of those who rely on you. Turn this pain into strength. Only by becoming strong enough to control your own fate can you hope for a different future. You must live well. That is the best tribute to everyone, including Charlotte." I took a deep breath, the Count's raw honesty clearing my clouded mind. The Count's willingness to reveal his own pain showed he truly viewed me as a successor and ally. I resolved not to sink into despair. I would bury my pain and use it as fuel. I would build up Conford until I possessed the power to dictate my own destiny and bargain with the royal family. This resolve took root in my heart. My eyes hardened with determination as I nodded to the Count. "I understand, Count. Thank you for waking me up." The Count smiled with relief and a hint of fatigue. "Good. Now, you didn't come to France City just for advice. Let's discuss business." I quickly regained my focus. "I brought 2,000 heads of Solon soldiers. I wish to offer them to you as a token of my gratitude." Count Rochefort nodded. 2,000? You've learned to be calculating. The royal capital has changed you. "The king and his corrupt bureaucrats taught me," I replied. "Heads sent to the capital only earn empty checks. They are better used here." The Count leaned forward. "And the rest? What are you doing with them?" I admitted, "I have 2,000 more. I want to trade them with other northern frontier lords for supplies, but I lack the connections." The Count tapped his chair, weighing the request. "I can introduce you to Count Fischella of Westwind City and Marquis York of Wharton's Castle. Both need military merit. I will write letters of introduction for you." I bowed deeply. "Thank you, Count. I will never forget this." The Count waved him off. I continued, "I also need your approval to recruit refugees in France City to help rebuild Conford's depleted population." The Count agreed immediately. "The Solonians have left many displaced. This will ease our burden as well. It is a win-win. However, your success depends on your own ability to attract them." I outlined my plan. I have survivors from France City with me who will return to their neighborhoods to share their stories. They will testify to our defense and the opportunities awaiting in Conford. The Count nodded in approval. I proposed a bolder plan. With the Solonians retreating, I intend to use this window of peace. I will organize hunters and woodsmen to venture into the northern frontier for resources. We will collect rare herbs and furs to form a trade caravan, selling them in the capital and the wealthy south. This will economically weaken the Solonians while funding our reconstruction. I ask for your support regarding trade safety and passage. The Count smiled. Penetrating the north through trade, a bold and insightful plan. I support it. France City will provide support and patrols to secure your trade routes. A weight lifted from my heart. I stood and bowed. Thank you, Count. I will not let you down. I must go and begin preparations. Go. Stay steady, one step at a time, the Count said, watching him leave. The Count looked at my straight back with complex expectations. Perhaps this young man could truly carve out a future in the harsh northern frontier. I stepped out of the governor's mansion, clearing my mind. I locked my emotions away. Rebuilding Conford was my only priority. A scribe assigned by the Count followed me to assist with the transition. I gripped the imperial decree in my hand. I had viewed it as a shackle, but suddenly, a thought struck me. This decree, representing the king's will, could be a tool. What better way to prove Conford's security and my own status to potential refugees than by showing off the king's personal decree and the royal marriage? It was the perfect advertisement. As for the Queen Mother's reaction, it didn't matter. With the royal capital in chaos following the coup, Queen Mother Catherine was too busy consolidating power to care about a prince consort in the north using a decree to recruit peasants. As long as I didn't openly rebel, they would be too distracted to notice. My strategy solidified. I returned to the camp. Leon, I ordered, pointing to the scribe, hand over the wagons of heads and the inventory to this official. Yes, sir. Leon immediately began the transfer. The scribe's men quickly took charge of the covered wagons, departing quietly toward the Count's warehouse. I turned to the 15 young men from France City, who stood tall, brimming with nervous excitement. As Edgar briefed you, I said firmly, return to your streets. Find relatives, friends, and anyone struggling who seeks a new opportunity. Use your own words to describe Conford. What happened there, and the future we offer. I've set up a collection point 1 kilometer outside the North Gate. Bring recruits there. We will handle their transport to Conford. I paused, my expression hardening with resolve. I raised the imperial decree, my voice booming with manufactured fervor. Men, I have even greater news. I ensured everyone was listening. I have just received an imperial decree from His Majesty, Sigmund. I let the weight of the new king sink in before adding. His Majesty has officially recognized the Conford army's heroic defense against the Solonians. Furthermore, to honor our service, he has betrothed his sister, Princess Louise, to me. I am to be the prince consort of the Plantagenet kingdom. The news hit like a thunderclap, leaving the men stunned before they erupted in cheers. The princess? A prince consort, they gasped in disbelief. They looked at me with newfound, fanatical worship. I was the leader who had taken over the forgotten fortress of Conford when the northern frontier was collapsing. I had led them, a ragtag group of remnants and refugees, to hold off 100,000 Solonians against all odds. To them, I was already a hero, but they hadn't imagined my influence had reached such heights. Even the new king, needing to stabilize his reign, was honoring them with such an unprecedented gesture. This wasn't just a title, it was a royal marriage, a political signal of immense weight. Conford was no longer a backwater. It was now at the center of the kingdom's power. As the first to follow me, their own status would inevitably rise. With the Lord as the prince consort, Conford would receive royal resources, and they would surely be rewarded with titles and lands. A surge of loyalty and excitement swept through the group. They exchanged determined glances. They needed no further motivation to fulfill their mission. They would bring more people to Conford to honor this royal recognition. I pressed my advantage. This is still a royal secret, but I authorize you to use it as proof. Spread the word. I brandished the decree. Tell them Conford is backed by the king himself. With the princess coming to reside here, Our security and future are guaranteed. This is our ultimate endorsement. Yes, my lord, they shouted emboldened. The task, once daunting, now felt easy with the king's favor as their trump card. It was the ultimate tool for persuasion. Go. Let all of France City hear the name of Conford. I commanded. Yes, they roared in unison. They saluted and scattered into the city, fueled by unprecedented zeal. Watching them leave, I lowered the decree, my expression shifting to one of complex gravity. I hoped this royal glory would translate into the population and vitality Conford desperately needed. The true cost of this alliance, however, remained buried in my heart. Tommy, a new recruit, walked the dirt road toward his home in Gallon Village. He was one of the soldiers who had fought street by street when the outer walls of Conford fell. He had retreated to a 3-story stone building with the veteran Roderick and others. They held the stairs and windows, buying time for their comrades to reach the inner defense. When the Solonians set the building ablaze, they were trapped by fire and smoke. Roderick led them in a desperate leap from a back window, and they fled into the chaos. They ran into a Solonian patrol, and Tommy was pinned down, a blade at his throat. Roderick saved him with a lethal strike, pulling him back from the brink of death. Together, they survived the brutal meat grinder of the final defense. As the sun set, Tommy looked at the neglected fields lining the road, a testament to the hardship of the region. He felt a mix of nostalgia and heavy sorrow. Gallon Village, his home for generations, lay ahead. Tommy's father was a tenant farmer struggling to survive on a lord's meager plots. Last winter, a sudden illness broke his father's frail body. To pay for treatment, the family exhausted their savings and sold the tenancy rights to their land. Despite this, his father died, leaving behind a sickly mother, a young sister, and a mountain of debt. At 17, Tommy became the sole provider. With no land, he worked in dangerous, low-paying mines, living hand-to-mouth. Seeing his mother's health decline and his sister starving, Tommy felt helpless. Then, a turning point arrived. Count Rochefort issued a call for volunteers to defend Conford in the northern frontier, offering a generous settlement allowance. For the impoverished Tommy, this was a lifeline. Despite the dangers of war, the money promised security for his family, so he signed up without hesitation. He sent most of the allowance home and left for Conford. He was gone for nearly 6 months. He survived the brutal siege of Conford, witnessing death and maturing through the fires of war. He found solace in the thought that his sacrifice bought his family safety. Now, with the war paused, he returned to France City with I, tasked with recruiting new settlers. Walking home, he was filled with longing and anxiety. How were his mother and sister? Had they survived the half-year? The Lord's mission also weighed heavily on him. He understood the importance of this recruitment for Conford's future. He planned to settle his family first, then recruit neighbors and fellow miners by sharing his experiences and the promise of royal backing. Seeing Gallon Village at sunset, Tommy steeled himself and quickened his pace. Gallon Village was a small settlement of about 400 people. In these chaotic times, even inland villages functioned as small fortresses. To deter bandits and deserters, Plantagenet Kingdom villages were built with basic defensive systems. They featured rammed earth walls with crenellations, a single main gate guarded by villagers, and shallow trenches. While not as sturdy as a castle, these defenses provided the best protection the villagers could manage. Reaching the village, Tommy finally felt a sense of home. Unlike the abandoned fields near France City, the local crops were still being tended, however weakly. He arrived at the familiar, crooked wooden gate. An elderly man in a tattered coat dozed by the gatepost. Tommy showed his Conford soldier's badge, and the old man lazily waved him through. The village streets were narrow and muddy, lined with humble mud brick or wooden houses. The air smelled of livestock, smoke, and mold. The villagers looked gaunt and hollow-eyed, seemingly drained of life. They wore patched, faded rags, working silently or sitting listlessly by their huts. They eyed Tommy, cleaner and carrying a full pack, with cold, jealous suspicion before returning to their struggle. A few neighbors recognized him, asking in disbelief, "Tommy? Is that you? Why are you back?" Their eyes were fixed on his heavy pack. Tommy offered a tired smile. "It's me, Uncle Jack. The war settled down, so I came back to check on things." Old Jack squinted at his decent clothes, asking, "Did you make something of yourself in the north? Better than us, surely." Tommy shook his head. "Just lucky to find work in Conford. It's hard living." He walked deeper into the village, his heart tightening. He stopped before a larger but dilapidated stone house. This was his home. His father had built it stone by stone, once a symbol of the family's pride. Now, it broke Tommy's heart. A wall had collapsed, patched with sticks and straw. The structure leaned precariously, and the mud plaster had fallen away. The sturdy door his father had crafted was cracked and hanging off its hinges. This was the home of his childhood. Standing before it, he hesitated to enter. Tommy took a deep breath to gather his courage. He pushed the door, which groaned in protest. In the dim light, a thin figure stood by the stove, cooking a thin gruel. Hearing the door, the woman turned, wary. Seeing the tall, travel-worn figure, she froze, her wooden spoon clattering to the floor. "Tommy, my child, is it you?" she trembled. It was his mother, aged significantly in just 6 months, her eyes wide with shock and joy. "Mother, it's me," Tommy choked out, stepping inside. She rushed forward, grabbing his hands with her rough, cold fingers. She frantically checked his limbs, muttering, "Thank the goddess, you're whole. No major injuries." Confirming he was safe, she hugged him tightly, her months of suppressed fear and longing erupting into tears. "My child, you've come back safely." Tommy hugged his trembling mother, his eyes welling with tears. "I'm fine, Mom. Don't cry," he comforted her. After a while, she calmed down. Looking around the dilapidated house, Tommy asked, "Where is Sarah?" "She's at the river washing clothes for the Johns to earn money," his mother replied, moving to go get her. Tommy stopped her, and they walked out together. They reached the river, hearing the water flowing. Several women were scrubbing clothes on the rocks. Sarah was among them, shivering in the cold water. "Sarah," his mother called. The girl turned around. She looked pale and frail from the cold. Seeing Tommy, she dropped her laundry and ran to him. "Brother," she sobbed, hugging him. "You're back." Tommy held her close, apologizing for the suffering they endured. His mother joined the embrace, all three weeping. Their tears were a mix of relief, sorrow, and joy. Passers-by watched the reunion, which briefly dispelled their hardships. To Tommy, their survival was everything. "Let's go home, it's cold," Tommy said. Sarah hesitated, worried about the 2 copper coins she would lose if she didn't finish the laundry. "No more of that," Tommy said firmly. "I'm back now." He patted his heavy pack. "I have money." Sarah remained hesitant. Tommy walked to another woman nearby. She looked at him nervously. Tommy handed her 10 copper coins. "Please finish my sister's laundry." The woman was stunned. It was a fortune. She eagerly accepted, promising to finish the work. Sarah was still worried about the expense. Tommy firmly guided his mother and sister away. "Let's go home," he said. His mother nodded, comforted by his maturity. Sarah followed them, leaving the river behind. The sunset cast long shadows, signaling hope. They returned to their stone house. His mother and sister began preparing dinner. Tommy joined them. He was heartbroken by the meager supplies. Dinner consisted of hard black bread, boiled turnips, and dried peas. "Is this all you eat?" Tommy asked. "It's enough to get by," his mother replied. Tommy opened his pack. He produced a large piece of smoked meat. He had saved it from his military pay. "Meat!" Sarah exclaimed. His mother protested, wanting him to save it or sell it. She tried to refuse. Tommy sliced it and heated it over the fire. "We won't eat like this anymore," he insisted. His mother asked if he was doing well in Conford. The aroma filled the room. "Lord Carl is fair," Tommy explained. "He rewards bravery and hard work. I've been promoted to a combat soldier. I'll earn 1 silver coin and 50 copper coins a month." Sarah gasped in disbelief. It was more than she earned in months. His mother smiled proudly. Dinner was ready. They sat down to the most lavish meal they had seen in months. Tommy insisted they eat the meat. Seeing the state of the house, he asked, "What happened to the settlement allowance from the count? Why is it still so poor here?" He remembered it as a large sum. His mother sighed. "That money cannot be touched lightly." Anna told Tommy, "With your father gone and you serving the Lord, we have no men left. I must manage our money carefully to survive." She added softly, "I must save for your future marriage and Sarah's dowry. I have to plan for us." Her words weighed heavily on Tommy. Seeing his mother's haggard face and his sister's frostbitten hands, Tommy blurted out, "Mother, Sarah, come with me to Confort." They stared at him in shock. Tommy continued excitedly, "The war is over, and the Lord encourages clearing land. With my pay, we can build a sturdy, warm house and leave this drafty shack behind." Anna looked around their home, hesitant. "Move to Confort? But this is our home, and we have our belongings." "Family is more important than a house," Tommy urged. "We can be together, and I can look after you. I can even find Sarah work at the castle or market so she doesn't have to wash clothes in the freezing cold." He grabbed Sarah's chapped, calloused hands. "Look at her hands, Mother. Can you bear to let her waste her life in ice water? Let's start a new life in Confort." Anna's gaze fell on her daughter's scarred hands, each crack piercing her heart. She touched the wounds, her throat tight, and let out a heavy sigh. By candlelight, she saw Tommy's hopeful eyes and Sarah's silent yearning. Worried, she asked, "But what about the Sorin barbarians? Isn't the border dangerous?" "Mother, we won a great victory," Tommy boasted. "Lord, I held off 100,000 Sorin troops with only a few hundred men. Confort is the safest place in the northern frontier now." Anna traced a scratch on the table, a memory of her late husband. "But this house, it was your father's life's work," she murmured. Tommy held her hand. "If Father were here, he'd want us to be warm and fed. His greatest wish was our well-being. Let's start over, Mother." After a long silence, Anna looked at her children and the cold, decaying room. She exhaled, releasing her burden, and nodded. "You're right. Your father would understand. We will go." Tommy beamed. "Pack only the essentials. We can buy everything in Confort. I have duties to finish, but we leave in a few days." Sarah jumped with joy. "We're going to Confort. I've heard about the high castle and the bustling markets." She had long dreamed of the world beyond Gallon Village, and now, with her family, she felt ready for the adventure. The next morning, before dawn, Tommy rose. He declined a hot meal, drinking only cold porridge. He instructed his mother and sister to pack and quietly look for a buyer for their shack. Knowing the house was worth little, he set off to recruit others, starting with his hometown, Gallon Village. He knew village chief John would never allow him to poach his subjects. To John, these villagers were mere property, sources of rent and corvée labor. Any attempt to take them would trigger John's fury and potential violence. Thus, Tommy had to recruit in secret. He targeted his childhood friends, Lex, the hunter's son, and Finn, the blacksmith's apprentice. They had shared countless childhood memories together. Lex was agile and tough. Finn was strong and hardworking. They were the most reliable candidates for his new life. Tommy walked the muddy village road, scanning the miserable, starving villagers while plotting how to accidentally meet his friends. The winter air was biting, and the village looked desolate. Near the old oak tree, he spotted a familiar figure. A man in a tattered, stained fur coat, carrying an old bough and a woodcutter's knife, walked toward the forest. His gait was steady but heavy with fatigue. Despite the man's gaunt appearance, Tommy recognized the hunter's stride. It was Lex. The once vibrant boy had been crushed by the weight of survival. Tommy took a breath and called out, "Lex, is that you?" The man spun around, eyes full of suspicion. As he recognized Tommy, his sharp, red-rimmed eyes widened in disbelief. "Tommy? Is it really you?" he rasped. "It's me, Lex. Long time no see." Tommy smiled. Up close, Lex's decline was shocking. His face was skeletal, his skin chapped and sallow. His sunken eyes reflected a life of numbness and hardship. Only those eyes, after the initial shock, still held a faint shadow of my youth. Lex scanned Tommy, noting his thick, well-stitched coat and heavy pack. "Good heavens, Tommy. I almost didn't recognize you. You've grown so sturdy and spirited." He paused, recalling, "Didn't you leave years ago with a recruiter for some count, heading far beyond the border?" "Yes, the autumn before last," Tommy nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "I went to the northern frontier, to a place called Confort, the domain of Lord I." "Confort," Lex repeated, eyes blank. To a young hunter who had never ventured beyond the local town, the northern frontier was a vague, distant concept. Sensing a change in Tommy, he asked curiously, "How is it over there?" "I hear it's chaotic with constant war." Tommy straightened, his voice rising with the pride of a veteran. "Chaotic? We just survived a cataclysmic battle. The Solonians, those northern savages, gathered 100,000 troops to swallow Conford whole. 100,000. Lex gasped, his eyes wide. The number was beyond his comprehension. My God, then how did you? We held, Tommy said firmly, eyes burning. Lord, I led us. Only a few thousand, and we withstood their relentless assaults. The walls were piled high with their corpses. We didn't just hold, we drove them back. He delivered the result of that brutal siege with blunt, impactful force. Lex stood dumbfounded. My God, a few thousand against 100,000. That's a miracle. Tommy, you actually fought. His gaze was filled with disbelief and newfound awe. Of course, Tommy replied instantly, needing Lex to see he was no longer a naive boy. I was on the walls, fighting those Solan beasts with spear and sword. He lowered his voice, his tone carrying the grim calm of a survivor. I killed 3 myself. 3 Solan soldiers? Lex's voice cracked. He stepped back, as if seeing his childhood friend for the first time. To a villager, killing 1 Solan soldier was heroic. 3 was legendary. The distance and strangeness in Lex's eyes were replaced by shock, curiosity, and a touch of worship. Tommy, you're incredible, he stammered, unable to find better words for his internal turmoil. Tommy smiled, naturally shifting the focus. Enough about me. What about you, Lex? How have you been? How are your parents? He noticed Lex's gaze flicker to his own thick coat. Then Lex quickly looked down, tugging at his own tattered, frozen stiff rags in embarrassment. Lex's excitement faded, replaced by deep bitterness. He offered a grimace that looked worse than tears. We're getting by, I suppose. His tone grew heavy. My father broke his leg falling off a cliff chasing a boar last winter. We spent everything we had on doctors and herbs. He walks with a limp now and can't hunt anymore. He sighed, his breath misting in the cold. I'm the only man left, so I had to take up his bow and axe. He said take up, with a tone of resigned, heavy duty. Times are hard, game is scarce, and Lord John's rent must be paid. But at least we get meat occasionally. We won't starve. He said this as much to comfort himself as Tommy. Yet, looking at his gaunt frame, frostbitten nose, and rags, the claim of not starving rang hollow. Tommy listened, his heart heavy. He looked at Lex, now a shadow of the lively boy he remembered, crushed by the weight of survival. Contrasting this with his own survival, newfound strength, and hopeful future in Conford, a surge of sympathy and the urge to help welled up in him. Words of comfort felt too light against such harsh reality. He silently opened his pack and pulled out a palm-sized strip of dried meat wrapped in oil paper. It was a ration bought with his wages, salty, hard, and packed with energy for long marches. To a villager who rarely saw meat, this was a rare delicacy. He handed it to Lex, his tone brooking no refusal. Take it. Brought it from the north. It's good, keeps you full. Lex's eyes locked onto the oily, thick meat, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. He could imagine the savory saltiness, a massive temptation for someone who hadn't had a full meal in ages. He struggled, instinctively pulling back. This is too valuable, Tommy. You should keep it. Don't be like that. Tommy shoved the meat into Lex's calloused, frost-bitten hands. Take it. Look at you, your skin and bones. Eat up and get some strength for the mountain. Feeling the weight of the meat, Lex stopped resisting. He looked up at Tommy's sincere, firm gaze, his eyes stinging with sudden warmth. He stopped refusing, clutching the meat like a lifeline. Thank you, Tommy. Eat up, Tommy said, patting his shoulder to lighten the mood. Lex nodded, tore open the paper, and took an eager bite, chewing vigorously. The long-forgotten savory richness filled his mouth, warming his numb body. As he chewed, he looked at Tommy with complex eyes, gratitude, envy, and a yearning for a different life. Seeing him devour the food, Tommy knew the time was right. He checked that no one was watching, then lowered his voice, his expression turning serious. Lex, don't just eat. Tell me, do you want to change how you live? Lex was still chewing the delicious meat, the savory warmth spreading through his body. Suddenly hearing Tommy's cryptic, suggestive question, he froze, stopping mid-chew, and looked up in utter confusion. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. Change how I live? Tommy, what do you mean? He couldn't fathom any other way beyond hunting, and paying rent on this barren land. Tommy looked into Lex's eyes, which were flickering with a new, faint light of curiosity, and knew the moment had arrived. Tommy decided to stop beating around the bush and hit Lex with the raw, impactful truth. Pointing to the piece of jerky in Lex's hand, he said, "In Conford, this is just standard military rations. We eat this every few days, and on normal days, we have all the black bread and bean soup we can eat. We never go hungry." Tommy stepped forward, tapping his own sturdy chest before gesturing to Lex's thin frame. "Look at me. Remember when we last met? I was scrawny and weak. Look at me now." Flexing his arm, he added, "This strength comes from Conford's camp. If I hadn't been well fed and trained, I wouldn't have survived the battlefield or killed 3 Solon soldiers." He gestured to Lex's tattered, thin coat. "Look at what you're wearing, then look at mine." He tugged at his own thick, warm uniform. "Join the Conford army, pass the assessment, and you get a set of winter and summer gear just like this." He dropped the clincher. "Plus, you get paid a salary of 1 silver coin and 50 copper coins every month. Not a single coin less. 1 silver coin and 50 copper coins monthly." Lex's eyes widened, his mouth agape. To him, this was a fortune. His family's annual harvest, after paying heavy rent and taxes to Lord John, barely left them with a few copper coins, often leaving them in debt. Lex's breathing quickened, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Tommy, are you serious? That much money? And good clothes? And enough food every day?" "I swear on my late father's name," Tommy replied firmly. "Lord Carl of Conford keeps his word. It's not just for service. It's his respect for every soldier who bleeds for Conford." Seeing Lex stunned, Tommy pushed further, offering a vision of security. "In Conford, if you're injured in training or battle, you get treated by skilled doctors with real medicine. If you're disabled, Lord Carl won't abandon you. He'll provide light work or a pension to ensure you're taken care of. And if the worst happens and you die, your family receives a generous pension so they can live securely." Tommy's voice was low and powerful. "Lex, why do you think our few thousand men held off Solon's 100,000-strong army? Because we aren't fighting for some lord. We're fighting for ourselves and our families. Lord Carl gave us dignity and hope. That's why we fight to the death." Lex stood frozen, clutching the jerky as if it were a ticket to another world. He didn't fear death. As a hunter, he fought beasts in harsh winters. He was no coward. Death itself wasn't the issue. He feared ending up like his father, disabled, a burden, and dying in poverty without dignity. He feared dying alone in the woods, his body left for beasts, leaving his parents to suffer in their old age. He feared his life would be worthless. The Conford Tommy described, where the wounded are healed, the disabled are fed, and soldiers are paid, sounded like heaven. It was a stark contrast to his hopeless, precarious life. A fire of longing ignited in his chest. Yet, reality pulled him back. His excitement dimmed, replaced by deep worry. He asked with a trembling voice, "Tommy, I believe you. But my father, he's crippled and can't do heavy labor. My mother is sickly, and my younger brothers are just children. If I leave, how will they survive?" His voice was filled with helplessness. Tommy smiled, having anticipated this. He patted Lex's shoulder. "Don't worry. Lord Carl already thought of that. Conford welcomes families. Once you pass the assessment and join the army, your parents can come with you." Tommy explained, "If you have no land, the Lord's Manor provides basic rations so you won't go hungry. Then, you'll be allocated 3 or 4 acres of good land based on your family size. Rations continue until your own harvest comes in next autumn. 3 or 4 acres. And rations until autumn." Lex's heart raced. For a tenant farmer who never owned an inch of land, this was monumental. It meant freedom from Lord John, a foundation for their lives, and no more fear of eviction. He choked up, trembling. "Really? My parents and brothers, they can come? And get land?" "Absolutely," Tommy confirmed. "Lex, think. Your hunting skills are great, but can you guarantee food every day? What about when the snow blocks the mountains? You risk your life for nothing, and if you get hurt like your uncle, what will your parents eat?" Tommy gestured to the barren, snow-covered forest. "In Gallon Village, you spend the winter counting your last scraps of food, terrified of starving. In Conford, even in winter, there's hot black bread and meat soup in the barracks. Your family will have land and a home. They won't be hungry or cold, and they won't have to worry about you freezing to death here. Tommy's final words shattered Lex's hesitation. Stay here, and there is no future for your parents. Come to Conford, and there is land, income, and security. It's the only way to give your parents a decent life and make something of yourself. Lex, will you stay here and rot in this misery, or have the courage to fight for a different future? You choose. Lex fell silent, looking at his calloused hands, then at Tommy's hopeful eyes, and finally at the land that had given him nothing but poverty and despair. Memories of my parents' suffering, the biting winter cold, and the ruthless rent collectors flashed through my mind. I looked up, my hesitation replaced by a desperate, burning resolve. Tommy, I'm coming with you to Conford, I said, my voice trembling with excitement. For my parents and for myself, I'm done living like this. Seeing the hunter-like focus in my eyes, Tommy knew the boy had made his choice. Tommy smiled and patted my shoulder. Good man. I knew you still had the guts. Go home, pack your things, and tell your parents, but keep it quiet. I'm going to find Finn. Wait for my signal. We leave as soon as possible. I nodded firmly, tucking the remaining jerky into my tunic like a precious treasure. I turned and headed toward my shack, my step light with newfound purpose. Tommy left, burdened by responsibility, and walked through the familiar, decaying streets of Gallon Village. The wind howled, carrying the stench of poverty, dung, and wood smoke. He headed for the blacksmith shop near the dried-up creek. The shop remained unchanged since he left a year ago. The low mud-brick building was topped with soot-stained thatch, the furnace glowing red as the bellows wheezed. The rhythmic clanging and the scent of sulfur instantly pulled Tommy back to his childhood memories. He slowed down, peering into the shed. Finn stood with his back to him, hammering a red-hot iron bar. It was indeed Finn. He was broader now, his bronze skin glistening with sweat under the furnace light. He wore a filthy headcloth and a tattered, ash-covered leather apron. Tommy felt a pang of doubt. He had expected Finn to have advanced from a mere apprentice to a skilled hand by now. Instead, Finn remained at the bottom of the hierarchy, performing the most grueling labor. His sweat-soaked back and the monotonous rhythm of the hammer proved his life hadn't improved. The blacksmith, Barton, roared, Finn, you lazy dog. Faster. If this iron isn't finished by dark, you'll get a beating. Finn picked up his pace, clearly accustomed to the abuse. Tommy stepped into the shadows and whispered, Finn, is that you? Finn stopped, wiped his sweat, and turned around. Recognition flashed across his ash-streaked face. Finn recognized him immediately, his expression one of pure shock. Tommy, Finn stammered. How are you back? I thought you were serving in the Count's army at the frontier. He sounded both surprised and anxious about his interrupted work. Tommy forced a smile. The fighting is over. The Lord granted us leave to visit home. He cut to the chase. Do you have a moment? I have something for you and news to share. Finn looked troubled. He glanced toward the back of the shop and whispered, Tommy, I can't. My master is watching. Suddenly resolute, Finn shouted toward the shop. Master Barton, I have a stomach ache. I need to go relieve myself. I'll be right back. Barton bellowed back. Lazy fool. Be quick, or you won't eat tonight. Finn signaled for Tommy to follow him. He dropped his hammer and rushed out of the sweltering shop. They stopped behind a dead locust tree, far enough to talk in private. Finn leaned against the trunk, catching his breath. Barton is a tyrant, Finn said urgently. What is so important that you had to come back? He stared curiously at Tommy's bulging bag. Tommy understood the harsh reality of the apprenticeship. Finn, I'm here on behalf of the Lord to recruit skilled workers for Conford. Seeing Finn's confusion, Tommy pointed at the shop. I want your blacksmithing skills. Conford needs craftsmen like you. Tommy detailed the benefits, a tiered ranking system, higher pay, promotion based on skill, and a guaranteed pension. Look at me, Tommy added. In Conford, the pay is good, we are well fed, and the Lord honors his promises. He values his craftsmen. Finn recalled his grueling life under Master Barton. The sweltering heat, constant verbal and physical abuse, punishments for practicing his craft, and the pittance he earned. Tommy's words ignited all his suppressed resentment. Conford is booming. Tommy painted a bright future. They need houses, weapons, tools, and ships. They need skilled young craftsmen like you. There, You'll find fair promotion, respect, and real rewards. You can live with dignity and honor your family, unlike this dead-end shop. Finn's throat tightened. He had no family, and Barton treated him like a beast of burden. Could his hammer really forge a better life? But I signed an apprentice contract. He asked, eyes gleaming. Tommy boasted, don't worry. Lord, I am the king's brother-in-law. I am far more powerful than John. I can easily void a small contract. Finn clenched his fists. He was done being Barton's punching bag. Fine. I'm coming to Conford with you. Suddenly, Barton's roar echoed from the shop. Finn, where the hell are you? Get back here and get to work. Finn flinched, his body instinctively reacting with habitual fear. He took a deep breath, burying his newfound hope to face the harsh reality. He whispered to Tommy, I understand. I'll tell my parents tonight and pack. I'll be there. Tommy nodded. Good. I've told Lex. Meet behind old Jack's barn at the west end of the village when the moon hits the treetops. It's secluded. Be careful. Don't let anyone see you. Behind old Jack's, moon at the treetops. Finn memorized the details. I've got it. Finn took one last look at Tommy, his expression a mix of nervousness and resolve. He turned and ran back into the stifling, smoke-filled forge, disappearing into the shadows. Tommy felt a weight lift, only to be replaced by new anxiety. He stood still, listening. Barton's furious shouting followed, punctuated by the heavy thud of a hammer against an anvil, sounds that felt like blows against Finn. Tommy's heart tightened, imagining Finn enduring the abuse to appease his master. Suddenly, the burly, bearded Barton turned, his sharp, suspicious eyes scanning through the smoke toward Tommy. The gaze was hostile, questioning the stranger's presence. Tommy panicked. He feigned the casual air of a villager and walked away toward his home. He felt the gaze like a thorn in his back until he rounded a corner, finally escaping Barton's sight. Tommy quickened his pace. He knew he had to act fast. A man as shrewd as Barton would soon grow suspicious. He reached his dilapidated hut, soon to be abandoned. Inside, the familiar scent of firewood and food greeted him. His mother, Anna, and sister, Sarah, were there. A pot of vegetable stew bubbled on the stove. The room was dim but tidy, with belongings already packed. Anna wiped her hands on her apron and approached him. She looked exhausted and teary-eyed, yet relieved, despite the pain of leaving her home. She pulled out a small cloth bag containing a few worn silver coins and copper pieces. Tommy, she choked out, the house. John the village head bought it. She touched the coins, trembling. He only gave me 10 silver coins. I told him it cost over 100 to build, but he said houses here are worthless now. Take it or leave it. Tears fell onto the cloth. I know we're desperate, so I had to sell. She handed the bag to Tommy, the history of their family reduced to a pittance. Tommy felt a surge of rage. 10 silver coins. John was a bloodsucker, preying on their desperation. The house was priceless to his parents, yet it was sold for an insulting sum. He suppressed his anger. Now was not the time for rashness. He pushed the bag back into his mother's hands. Keep the money, Mom. 10 coins is fine. We're leaving, and this house doesn't matter anymore. What matters is getting to Confort safely. There's land and hope there. Don't be sad. Dad would want us to have a better life. Anna wept, but she nodded, seeing her son's newfound strength. She knew he was right. She wiped her eyes and tucked the money away, her ticket to a new life. I know. I'm not sad anymore, she murmured. Little Sarah, who had been watching, finally spoke up. She tugged at Tommy's sleeve, eyes wide with wonder. Tommy, is Conford fun? Are there big houses? Sweet honey, are there lots of strong soldiers like you? Her innocence dispelled Tommy's gloom. He ruffled her hair and smiled warmly. Conford isn't for play, it's our new home. We don't have a big house yet, but I promise I'll get you one. And the honey? I'll work hard and buy you plenty. There are hard-working people and soldiers protecting us there. Enough questions, eat up. Then help me pack. We leave soon. Yay! Sarah cheered, clapping at the mention of a new home and big house, then sat down to eat. Meanwhile, in the village center, village chief John sat in his warm, fur-lined study within his brick mansion. He toyed with the property deeds for Tommy's house, recently bought cheap from Anna. Rubbing the rough parchment, he wore a greedy, triumphant smile. Humph, Tommy's shack, he muttered. Old Tommy spent over 100 silver coins building that place years ago. It's old, but the location is decent. I'll fix it up and flip it for 30 or 50 coins. That fool Anna sold it for 10 just to run off with her son. What a steal. John was briefly surprised by the sale, but was too blinded by profit to think deeply. He'd seen Tommy yesterday. The boy looked sturdy, well-dressed, and carried a large pack. Must have done well out there, John sneered. Taking his mother and sister? Good riddance. The house and land are mine now. He didn't care about the why or the fate of these peasants, as long as he profited. As John admired his trophy, a servant announced, "Sir, Mr. Edward is here with urgent news." Edward? John raised an eyebrow. Edward was the village's second most powerful landowner, a rival and occasional partner. John straightened his posture. Let him in. Edward, a shrewd-looking man of 50 in a fine wool coat, entered. He bowed, looking cautious and perplexed. Edward, what is it? John asked condescendingly. Edward didn't sit, instead handing over an old parchment. Sorry to disturb you, Chief. This afternoon, the hunter Lex, Hanson's son, suddenly offered to sell me his shack and land. They wouldn't say where they were going. It felt suspicious, so I brought the deed for your judgment. John frowned, taking the deed. Lex, the poor hunter, was leaving too? His triumph over the Tommy deal was replaced by a flicker of doubt. Tommy's family had a reason to leave, but Lex's? Who would help a crippled father and a sickly mother? John pondered, eyes flickering. Edward waited, equally thoughtful. Both men sensed something unusual in these back-to-back sales. They couldn't quite put their finger on it. Greed made them hope to buy cheap, but their instinct for control whispered that something was changing. Before they could process this, a servant announced, "Sir, Barton the blacksmith is here with an emergency." Barton. John and Edward exchanged surprised looks. Barton was a hot-tempered blacksmith who rarely visited, especially at dusk. The air grew thick with unease. Let him in, John said, leaning forward with authority. Barton burst in, still radiating the heat of his forge. He was sweating, his face red with rage and anxiety. Ignoring formalities, he shouted, "Chief John, and Mr. Edward, you must help me." John frowned. Calm down, Barton. Speak slowly. I can't. Barton waved his arms. It's my apprentice, Finn. He claimed a stomachache to skip work. He's never done that. I sent a worker to check, and he said he's quitting, tearing up his 5-year apprentice contract and leaving. Barton's chest heaved. He's betraying me after I fed and trained him. He pointed toward the door. And I saw Tommy lurking outside my shop talking to Finn today. It's that soldier Tommy. He's behind this. Arrest him and that brat Finn. The accusation connected all the dots for John and Edward. Tommy's return, the house sales, Finn's broken contract. It all pointed to one conclusion. John stood up, his face dark with fury. He slammed the desk. So that's it. Tommy, you come back and try to poach my subjects? You're trying to ruin me. He realized Tommy wasn't just moving his family. He was systematically recruiting people to defect to Conford, the place that defeated the Solonians. Selling property was to fund the journey and sever ties. This was an organized rebellion against his authority. Edward gasped in realization. Tommy is trying to spirit away the whole village. John forced himself to stay calm, his eyes cold. He turned to Barton. Don't worry, Barton. Breaking a sacred apprentice contract is intolerable. Kingdom law and village regulations will deal with this. I will punish these lawless people severely to uphold the contract and village order. I promised. Go back and watch your shop. I will handle this. Barton's anger subsided slightly, though he still grumbled. Lord John, be quick. Don't let them escape, especially that brat Tommy. I know. Go back. I waved him off. Barton bowed sullenly and strode away, his heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. The study fell into a tense, ominous silence between me and Edward. I tapped the desk, my gaze icy. Edward, you heard him. It's no coincidence. Tommy is plotting to defect to Conford with Lex, Finn, and their families. Edward nodded, his face hardening. The village chief is right. Tommy thinks he's special because he killed a few Soren barbarians. We can't let him undermine us. I analyzed the situation. We cannot allow this. If they succeed, it sets a dangerous precedent. Other tenants and apprentices will think they can simply stop paying rent or labor, fleeing to Conford for a better life. If this spreads, who will work our land? Our authority would vanish, and our village would be emptied. Edward turned pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He realized this wasn't just about losing a few tenants. It threatened their entire foundation of rule. "You're right, Chief," Edward said, his voice sharp with fear. "We must capture and punish them to set an example." I nodded, my eyes cold. I began deploying my forces like a general planning a campaign. "We can't rely solely on our own men," I mused. "Tommy has combat experience. He's killed Solonians. Lex is a nimble hunter, and Finn is strong. If they resist, we could face unnecessary casualties." I turned to Edward. "Tonight, gather your 10 most loyal men. Equip them with iron-tipped staffs, enough to subdue them without causing unnecessary deaths." "Understood, Chief. I'll arrange it immediately," Edward replied, eager to participate. I continued. "I will mobilize 10 of my own elite guards and 10 from the village guard under Captain Hugo. With 30 armed men, we will easily overwhelm the 3 families. We must strike with overwhelming force and capture them all." Edward nodded excitedly. 30 against a handful. They won't stand a chance. I added sternly. "Be fast, precise, and ruthless, but keep casualties to a minimum. I want Tommy alive. I need to interrogate him about what Conford promised. But if they resist, kill them. Do not let anyone escape." "Understood." Edward left to assemble his men. I stood alone, my resolve hardening. I ordered my servant, Old Cole, to summon Hank and his 10 elite guards, armed with iron-tipped staffs, and tell Captain Hugo to bring his 10 best men immediately for an emergency mission vital to the village's survival. "Yes, sir." Old Cole hurried away. I looked out at Gallant Village, my gaze cold and resolute. I would show these peasants who the true master of Gallant Village was. I would extinguish this rebellion and show everyone the cost of betrayal. That night, Gallant Village fell into its usual dark, silent slumber. A biting wind whistled through the trees and huts. For the villagers, the night was merely for recovering from the cold. Most extinguished their lamps early to save oil, huddling in the cold to sleep. The village lay like a tired beast, broken only by the occasional dog bark. Beneath this silence, a dangerous force was gathering. In the estates of me and Edward, men were arming themselves in hushed tones. 30 men in total had assembled. While not elite soldiers, they were professional at suppressing peasants. They were accustomed to using force to maintain the order of their masters. They moved with a cold, numb indifference, tinged with the excitement of impending violence. The operation began. Divided into 3 teams led by me, Edward, and Hugo, they moved to strike the homes of Lex, Finn, and Tommy simultaneously. Lex's family was the first to be ready. After Lex explained the plan to his sick parents, they agreed. They had nothing left to lose in this village. They preferred a risky future over a slow death here. With their meager belongings packed, they prepared to leave. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped out of their hut toward the meeting point at the old threshing floor. Far from the village center, Lex's family huddled behind a crumbling wall in the freezing night, waiting for Tommy and Finn. They waited in the dark, anxious yet hopeful. The biting wind made the younger brothers shiver, and Anna pulled them close. Lex watched the shadows, his heart racing with nervous anticipation. Instead of Tommy, they were surrounded by sudden, rapid footsteps and emerging figures. A dozen men armed with iron-tipped staffs encircled the family, cutting off all escape. Torches flared, revealing village guard Captain Hugo's cold, official expression and his menacing men. "Lex," Hugo barked, eyeing their bundles. "Sneaking out in the dead of night? Trying to flee your status as serfs?" Lex's heart sank. The plan was compromised. He shielded his family, stammering, "Captain Hugo, we were just..." Any explanation felt futile against the prepared ambush. "Waiting for Tommy to join your rebellion." Hugo sneered. "Take them. Use force if they resist." As guards lunged, Lex instinctively dodged and shoved one away. A staff struck his back, sending him stumbling in agony. Another blow to his legs forced him to his knees. Before he could move, he was pinned and bound with rough rope. His parents' cries were silenced by force, and his brothers wept in terror. Within minutes, the family was bound and dragged away like livestock. Lex bled from the mouth, filled with impotent rage. Simultaneously, A similar scene unfolded at Finn's home. Finn was packing his meager tools, heart pounding with the hope of a new life. The door was kicked open, and a dozen men swarmed in, led by his master, Barton, and the landlord, Edward. Barton roared, "You ungrateful brat! Trying to break your apprentice contract and flee." Edward added coldly, "You're a runaway slave, Finn. By law, we can kill you on the spot. Surrender." Realizing he was trapped, Finn grabbed a hammer, shouting, "Stay back. I'll fight." Barton laughed. "Beat him until he can't stand." Finn fought back blindly but was quickly overwhelmed by the guards. After being struck repeatedly, he collapsed, unconscious. Barton kicked the prone Finn, cursing, "Traitor! Wait until the master deals with you." Finn was dragged away. Finally, village chief John led the hunt for Tommy, the supposed mastermind. They surrounded Tommy's isolated hut in silence. The house was dark and quiet. John signaled, and guards smashed the door open. They burst inside, torches illuminating the room. Tommy's mother, Anna, and sister, Sarah, were packing in frozen terror. Anna pulled Sarah close, her face turning pale as she recognized the village chief. "Search everywhere," John commanded, his eyes scanning for Tommy. Guards ransacked the hut, overturning furniture and belongings. They kicked open the door to the inner room. It was empty. Only a straw bed remained. John rushed in, checking the room himself. Tommy had vanished without a trace. "Tear this place apart. Find a cellar or hidden compartment," John roared. The guards searched every inch, but found nothing. As John's frustration grew, Hugo, Edward, and Barton arrived with the captured families. "Lex's family is caught, but no sign of Tommy," Hugo reported. "Finn is caught, but Tommy is missing," Edward added. John turned to Anna, his voice cold. "Where is he? Tell me, or face the consequences." Anna trembled but remained silent, clutching Sarah. She held on to the hope that her son had escaped. John struck her, but she refused to speak. He turned to Sarah, feigning kindness. "Little girl, tell me where your brother is, and I'll give you candy. Otherwise, everyone suffers." Sarah wept, burying her face in her mother's arms, unable to reveal Tommy's location. John's face turned purple with rage. He raised his boot to kick the girl, shouting, "You stubborn little brat." A brutal kick aimed for the child's back. Anna screamed, instinctively shielding Sarah with her own body to take the blow. She groaned, swaying but refusing to yield, clutching her daughter tightly despite the spreading pain. Tommy, the mastermind behind the Gallen village escape, had mysteriously vanished amidst the siege. I lay pressed against the cold, thatched roof of my home, blending into the darkness. The biting wind cut through my thin clothes like blades. I shivered uncontrollably, my teeth chattering, my breath misting in the air. I remained deathly still, terrified that the slightest rustle of straw would alert the thugs below. A veteran of the Conford bloodbath, I possessed combat-honed reflexes far beyond my years. Moments earlier, I had been packing my bag to meet my family at the rendezvous point. I heard suspicious, muffled footsteps and the scrape of metal against the ground. Instinct screamed that the plan had been compromised. They were under attack. I couldn't risk calling out to my mother and sister. Any noise would doom them all. I recalled the cruelest lesson of war. Preserve the asset, especially one with a mission. If I were captured, the recruitment mission for Lord Carl would fail, and my allies would be lost. I hid my bag under the bed and scrambled toward the small, dilapidated window. The window was secured only by rotting wooden slats. I pried them open and squeezed through. Avoiding the open ground, I chose to climb. Using my military climbing skills, I scaled the wall and flattened myself against the shadows of the thatched roof. Below, I heard the door crash open and my family's terrified screams as the thugs ransacked the house. Every sound was a lash. I bit my hand to suppress my agony and rage. Hearing John's interrogation and the news that Lex and Finn had been captured, my heart sank. My worst fears were realized. My friends were trapped, and I was powerless. The freezing wind numbed my limbs and clouded my mind. I forced myself to stay conscious, desperately searching for a solution. With my family and friends captured, Gallen Village was now a death trap. My only hope was Lord Carl in France City, a hero of the northern frontier and the king's brother-in-law. If Lord Carl intervened, there was a chance to save them. Yet, shame washed over me. I had failed my mission and now had to beg for help. I felt humiliated, blaming my own incompetence for the disaster. I remained frozen on the roof, a forgotten statue. John, unwilling to let me escape, ordered the guards to widen the search. I watched the torches move through the village, hearing the dogs and the panicked whispers of villagers. The village was in chaos, and I feared the search would reach the roof. Fortunately, the guards focused on the ground, never suspecting I was above them. As the first light of dawn appeared, the long night ended. The noise subsided as the guards extinguished their torches and dispersed. Assuming I had fled, they withdrew, though they tightened security at the village exits. I waited until the light was sufficient to see, but not to be seen. My body was nearly numb, sustained only by sheer will. I moved my stiff joints with agonizing slowness. Confirming the yard was empty, I descended silently to the ground. Pain surged through my legs, but I forced myself to breathe and move. I navigated the village through the most obscure paths, moving like a ghost. I avoided the main roads and the guarded village gates. I reached a low, broken wall at the edge of the village near the wasteland. I cast one final, pained look at the village, vowing to return. "Wait for me," I whispered. "Lord Carl will help us." I vaulted the wall, landed on the frozen ground, and set my sights on France City. I began a desperate run toward the city, the beacon of my salvation. The wind howled, but the fire of vengeance and love burned in my eyes. I had to reach France City. It was their only chance. Outside the northern gate of France City, the camp was cold and silent. I stood alone outside my tent, letting the biting wind clear my troubled mind. I barely slept, my mind haunted by the imperial decree, the Count's helpless gaze, and Charlotte's departure. The events felt like a grotesque nightmare, yet they were etched into my memory with agonizing clarity. At dawn, I briefly tried to convince myself it was all a dream. I imagined I was still the frontier lord whose war exploits had won Charlotte's heart, waiting to marry her in France City. Reality, however, struck me with cruel precision. The cold weight of the decree and terms like prince consort pierced my delusions like poisoned daggers. Everything had changed. Charlotte had been torn from my life by the brutal hand of power, likely suffering as much as I was. My own future had been traded away by the court in Place City as if I were mere spoils of war. It was ironic. In my past life, I had at least enjoyed the freedom to love. Now, despite my power, army, and status, I lacked the basic right to choose my own life partner. Was this the price of being a big shot, or just another malicious prank by fate? I inhaled the freezing air, suppressing my anger, loss, and guilt over Charlotte. This was no time for personal indulgence. I was the Lord of Conford, the pillar for thousands of soldiers and subjects. Their survival rested on my shoulders. Strengthening Conford to secure a foothold in the northern frontier was my only priority. Personal grief had to yield to the survival of my territory. "Fine, I'll marry the princess," I muttered, my voice devoid of emotion. If I couldn't resist, I would exploit the status of prince consort for political gain. A hurried footstep interrupted my thoughts. A guard reported that Tommy, one of the recruiters sent to Gallon Village, had returned in a wretched state. I recalled Tommy, a clever youth handpicked by Edgar to recruit people from my hometown. Why was he back, and in such a state? I regained my composure. "Bring him in," I ordered, retreating to my tent. Tommy looked unrecognizable. He was covered in frostbite, scratches, and dust, wearing rags that offered no protection against the cold. He trembled violently, his eyes filled with exhaustion and desperate hope. He lacked the strength even to hold a cloak offered by a soldier. "Tommy," I asked, my voice steady. "What happened?" Tommy nearly collapsed, supported by the guards. "My lord, I failed you. Village Chief John discovered my plan. My friends, my mother, my sister, they've all been captured." Tommy forced himself to recount the ordeal. He explained how he had tried to convince his friends Lex and Finn to flee to Conford, only for the plan to leak. Chief John, the landlord Edward, and the blacksmith Barton had orchestrated a night raid. Tommy had escaped over a roof, but his family and friends were taken. He begged for their rescue, blaming himself for the failure. "Please, my lord, save them. John is ruthless. He won't let them live." Silence filled the tent as the guards watched their lord. I listened coldly. Local tyrants abusing their power to keep serfs and apprentices in check was common. Previously, this would have been a tedious legal and political headache. But now, the situation was different. Tommy was my soldier, a man who had bled for Conford. His family deserved the Lord's protection. Touching my people was an insult to me. A village chief was nothing to a prince consort and guardian of the North. I could crush him like an ant. As my anger flared, a bolder, colder idea struck me like lightning. Bad news travels faster than good. My previous attempts at positive propaganda about Conford's prosperity were likely dismissed by the skeptical, oppressed masses as lies. It was too slow to attract the population I needed. But what if I played the villain to the local tyrants? By leading my army to publicly judge and punish corrupt officials and redistributing their stolen wealth and land to the poor, I would create a massive stir among the oppressed. A reputation as a lord who kills bad masters and gives land to the poor would be far more effective at drawing desperate people to Conford than any hero narrative. It was a shortcut to prestige and population growth. As for the consequences, I was a prince consort and a war hero. Who in the North would dare challenge me, besides Count Rochefort? Given the Count's desire for stability, he would likely tolerate, or even welcome, the removal of disruptive local tyrants. It was, in the long run, beneficial for the governance of the northern frontier. Most importantly, I needed an outlet for the fury sparked by the royal marriage. The suppressed rage within me had nowhere to vent. John, the village head of Gallon Village, had conveniently placed himself in the line of fire. A just military expedition would serve as the perfect outlet for my frustration while simultaneously achieving my political goals and strengthening my forces. Seeing Tommy kneeling in despair, my icy expression softened into a gentle smile. I helped Tommy up, my voice steady and reassuring. "Rise, Tommy. No need for apologies or worry." I patted Tommy's trembling shoulder, my gaze seemingly piercing through the tent toward Gallon Village. "You are not at fault. Seeking a better life is human nature. Your family and friends suffer only because they trusted me and the hope I represent. As your lord, I, Karl von Schmidt, have the duty and obligation to rescue them from this suffering." I turned toward the camp and shouted, my voice carrying clearly across the grounds. "Orders! All cavalry, assemble. Arm yourselves, prepare the horses, and check your weapons. Our target is Gallon Village. Move out." The pale morning sun struggled to pierce the winter mist over the barren lands of Gallon Village. The village was filled with a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. Last night's sudden arrest had left the villagers sleepless and terrified. Now, the village head's servants were forcing everyone to gather at the central square. Inside John's stone mansion, the atmosphere was equally grim. Hugo, the village guard captain, stood before the sullen John. "Village head, the three families are locked in the dungeon," Hugo reported with practiced subservience. "As for Tommy, he's vanished. We searched every corner, even the forest edge. He likely escaped during the chaos last night." "Escaped?" John tapped the desk, his eyes sharp. Clever and cold-hearted enough to abandon his mother and sister. His tone turned icy. "But his mother, sister, and the families of Lex and Finn aren't going anywhere." Hugo asked tentatively, "How should we handle them? Just keep them locked up?" "Locked up," John sneered, pacing to the window to watch the fearful villagers gathering. "That won't deter anyone. This is a grave matter. Tommy incited rebellion. Lex and Finn, as tenants and apprentices, dared to conspire against their lord. This is a direct challenge to our village regulations and the law. If we just lock them up for a few days, the other restless wretches will think fleeing has no real consequences. If that happens, who will pay rent or serve? My authority would be non-existent." He glared at Hugo. "We must punish them severely, especially Lex and Finn. Take them from the dungeon to the village square." Hugo stiffened. "Understood, village head. What kind of punishment?" John's eyes glinted with cruelty. "Flogging. In the square, before everyone. Let them see the price of defiance. Whip them until they are broken and crying, until they never dare to think of fleeing again. But don't kill them. They still have debts to work off." "Understood." Hugo saluted and strode toward the damp dungeon. The dungeon, a repurposed vegetable cellar beneath the mansion, was where John kept disobedient subjects. It was dark, damp, and reeked of mold, waste, and despair. Lex's family of 5, Finn's family of 4, and Tommy's mother Anna and sister Sarah were crammed into filthy cells. The cells were locked, with only a sliver of light from a high vent. The sounds of sobbing women and whimpering children echoed through the space. Anna held the trembling Sarah, her face ashen but her eyes still holding a spark of defiance. Lex's father, the lame Hanson, leaned against the wall, coughing and filled with regret for dragging his family into this nightmare. Lex and Finn, bruised from their struggle the night before, suffered more from the agony of their family's plight than their own injuries. They locked eyes through the bars, sharing a look of deep despair, yet a faint flicker of hope remained. "Tommy, he escaped, right?" Lex asked, his voice raspy. Finn nodded, his eyes bright despite his pain. "He definitely did. I know Tommy. He's sharp and has seen combat in Confort. He won't be caught easily. Will he bring reinforcements?" Lex's mother asked from the next cell, her voice trembling with desperate hope. "He will." Finn gritted his teeth. "He'll go to Lord Carl. Tommy said the Lord treats his soldiers like brothers. He won't abandon us." Lord Carl. Would he really come to this remote village for a few poor souls like us? Old Hanson muttered pessimistically. "Father, Tommy is his soldier." Lex growled. "The Lord treats every soldier's family as his own. John has slapped the face of Conford by arresting us. That hero Lord won't let this slide." These words served to convince themselves, bringing a sliver of light into the dark dungeon. They fell silent, listening for any sound from above, praying for a miracle. Instead of a miracle, they heard heavy footsteps, the clatter of keys, and Hugo's cold, impatient voice. "Bring out the ringleaders, Lex and Finn." Hugo ordered his men. The cell doors were kicked open, and thugs rushed in to seize the 2 men. "What are you doing? Let my son go." The family screamed, trying to intervene, but were shoved aside and beaten. Lex and Finn, weakened by hunger and injury, were easily overpowered and dragged out. "Tommy, Lord Carl, save us!" Finn shouted as he was dragged into the corridor, his voice echoing with final desperation. In the village square, nearly 400 people had gathered. The air was thick with uneasy whispers. The villagers stood huddled in rags, their faces a mix of numbness, fear, and curiosity. In the center, 2 crude wooden frames had been erected, accompanied by buckets of water and heavy, water-soaked leather whips. The sight made many shudder. Near the front stood Edward the landowner and Barton the blacksmith. Edward sneered at the terrified villagers, relishing his control, while Barton loudly complained about Finn's ingratitude. Lex and Finn were bound and shoved toward the wooden frames. Wearing only thin, tattered clothes, they shivered violently in the freezing morning wind, their faces pale. Facing the whipping post, they showed undeniable fear but bit their lips, staring defiantly at the crowd. "Silence!" Hugo roared, silencing the square save for the whistling wind. Village Chief John stepped onto a raised platform, flanked by his servants. He cleared his throat and declared, "People of Gallen Village, we are here to punish 2 lawless scoundrels." Pointing at the pair, he continued, "Lex the hunter and Finn the apprentice. They conspired to abandon their duties and flee the village. This is a betrayal of the village, the Lord, and the kingdom's laws." John glared at the younger villagers, especially Finn. He signed a 5-year apprentice contract with Barton, who provided for him. Yet, he seeks to break it. "Barton, come forward as witness." Barton stepped out, shouting, "John is right. Finn is an ungrateful wolf. He hasn't even mastered the craft and wants to run. He deserves severe punishment." Barton's performance sparked a minor stir. Some sycophants echoed him, but most remained silent. John nodded. "For inciting flight and violating contracts, I sentence them to public flogging. Execute it now." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Flogging in midwinter could easily lead to permanent injury or death. Soft-hearted women turned away. Edward smirked, and Barton looked satisfied. Hugo designated 2 burly, vicious-looking servants as executioners. They scooped icy, slush-filled water from a bucket and doused Lex and Finn. The freezing water pierced their skin, causing them to shriek and convulse, their skin turning a ghastly cyan. The cold water was intended to heighten their agony and make the whipping more effective. Dissatisfied with his men, Hugo grabbed the heavy, frayed leather whip himself. He tested the weight, a cruel excitement on his face. He approached the trembling Lex, raised the whip, and tensed his muscles to strike. The square fell deathly silent. Children covered their eyes. Lex and Finn closed their eyes, bracing for the blow. Asterisk clop, clop, clop. Asterisk sudden, thunderous hoofbeats erupted from the village entrance, shattering the silence. It was the unmistakable, rhythmic roar of a cavalry charge on frozen ground. Hugo froze, his cruelty replaced by shock and panic. John stood rigid, Edward's smirk vanished, and Barton gaped as everyone turned toward the entrance. A massive cloud of dust rose as the rhythmic thundering intensified. The two lazy guards at the gate were trampled aside by an unstoppable torrent. Dozens of armored cavalrymen, covered in frost and dust, tore through the village defenses and charged toward the square. The ground shook. The sight of cold steel and the aura of battle-hardened soldiers sent villagers scrambling for cover. Leading the charge was Tommy, looking transformed and resolute atop his warhorse. Despite his exhaustion, his eyes burned with the fire of vengeance. The square was stunned into paralysis. Gallon Village had never seen a military charge in decades. The people were completely bewildered. A rider behind Tommy moved with lightning speed. Without slowing, I drew a short bow and fired with fluid precision. Twang! An arrow whistled through the air, piercing Hugo's shoulder just as he prepared to strike. Hugo shrieked, dropping the whip as the arrow shattered muscle and bone. He collapsed, clutching his bleeding arm in agony. The cavalry surged forward, forcing the crowd to part and clear a path to the center. Hooves kicked up ice and dirt as they arrived. Lex and Finn opened their eyes, stunned by the chaos. Seeing Tommy at the head of the cavalry, they were utterly dumbfounded. Tommy had fled last night. How was he back with an army? They thought they were hallucinating. Tommy reined in his horse before the wooden frames. He drew his sword and cleanly sliced the ropes binding Lex and Finn. The two collapsed, weak but staring at Tommy with ecstatic disbelief. "Who are you?" Edward shouted, trembling with rage, gesturing for his servants to intervene. The response was the sharp twang of more bowstrings. 2 arrows flew in quick succession, piercing the chests of the 2 club-wielding henchmen. The force drove the shafts through their thick winter coats, exiting their backs with bloodied tips. They collapsed instantly, dead before they could scream, their blood staining the frozen earth. This brutal, efficient display of lethal force shattered the crowd's remaining defiance. After a deathly silence, a shrill scream broke out. "Murder! The soldiers are killing people! Run!" Panic spread like a plague. The crowd erupted into chaos, pushing and shoving in a desperate, blind attempt to flee. "Quiet! Listen to me!" Tommy roared from his horse, his voice cutting through the pandemonium with newfound authority. The villagers froze, staring in shock at the familiar yet transformed youth. Tommy scanned the crowd, shouting clearly, "Look, it's me, Tommy. I haven't brought bandits. I've brought an army to secure justice for all of you." The villagers stared back, bewildered and skeptical of such foreign concepts. Tommy gestured to the imposing cavalry behind him. "The man here to judge this is I, Karl von Schmidt, Lord of Cranford, son of Duke Schmidt, and brother-in-law to our king." The titles hit the crowd like thunder. Lord of Cranford. They had heard Tommy's rumors but dismissed them as distant tales. Duke's son? King's brother-in-law? These were legendary figures, far removed from their world of taxes and toil. Why would such a high-ranking noble visit a backwater like Gallon Village? As the commotion died down, the cavalry parted, and a single rider emerged. I wore simple, practical dark armor beneath a thick wolf fur cloak. I sat tall, my young face weathered, my deep eyes radiating the cold, calm authority of one accustomed to holding the power of life and death. My mere presence silenced the crowd. Even crying children were stifled by their parents. My gaze swept over the trembling John, the wailing Hugo, the corpses, and finally the terrified villagers. "I am Karl von Schmidt," I stated coldly. "As the king's brother-in-law and guardian of the North, I declare John, mayor of Gallon Village, guilty of corruption, abuse of power, and illegal imprisonment. By kingdom law, he is sentenced to death, effective immediately." John staggered, nearly falling from the platform, his despair deepening at the mention of the king's authority. He knew how nobles could dispose of small-time crooks, but this was different. It was the invocation of the king's name that broke him. Why would a royal figure personally intervene in a petty village dispute? It seemed absurd, unless the man truly held the king's mandate. As doubt flickered in John's eyes, I acted. Anticipating their skepticism, I produced a scroll wrapped in yellow silk and tied with gold ribbon. I snapped it open before the crowd. The parchment shimmered in the morning light, adorned with intricate gold patterns. Most striking was the massive, crimson imperial jade seal at the bottom. Though illiterate, the villagers recognized the undeniable weight of such royal craftsmanship. This is the decree signed by King Sigmund himself, confirming my titles and authority as Guardian of the North. To see this is to see the king himself. To see the king himself. The words acted like a binding spell. The radiant decree and the blood-red seal looked divine against the backdrop of their squalid village. No one dared, or had the means, to forge such a symbol of royal power. Every shred of doubt vanished. The villagers looked at me with newfound awe, stunned that the king's law had actually reached their doorstep. I looked at the emaciated crowd. Furthermore, I declare that all debt and labor contracts binding you to John and his cohorts are hereby null and void. You are no longer serfs or debt slaves. You are free to stay, farm your land, or go wherever you wish, including my lands in Cranford. Freedom. The word struck the very core of their souls. For generations, they had been shackled to this soil. Freedom was a dream they never dared voice. Now, a man with the king's decree had made it reality. The square fell into a stunned, profound silence. John collapsed, realizing his power and his life had been erased by a single sentence from me. He had never imagined a dragon would descend to crush a mud-dweller like him. The decree was indeed a genuine document from the royal palace, signed by King Sigmund. However, the content I read, the death sentence and the emancipation of serfs, had nothing to do with the actual text. The real decree contained only routine royal honors, promotions, and the king's marriage arrangements. The title Guardian of the North was largely honorary, not a license for local judicial execution. But in this remote village, who had the literacy or the courage to challenge the authenticity of the royal seal? The silk, the gold, and the crimson seal were, in themselves, an unchallengeable authority. My words, backed by the divine decree, became the absolute law of the land. To doubt me was to blaspheme against the crown. Tommy dismounted and moved to help the shivering Lex and Finn from the wooden frame. Tommy quickly removed his thick Carnford army coat to wrap the freezing Lex, then secured a cloak from a nearby cavalryman for the shivering Finn. As warmth returned to their bodies, the pair looked at Tommy with a mix of lingering trauma and profound gratitude. Tommy, thank you, Lex stammered, his teeth chattering. Save your strength, Tommy replied, then urgently asked, where are your families? And my mother and sister? Lex's face clouded with worry. They're still in the dungeon, locked up with us. I don't know how they are. Finn nodded anxiously. Tommy felt a surge of cold, sharp rage. He glared at John, who sat slumped and ashen-faced by the dirt mound under guard.